Red Keep, King's Landing. Eddard Ned Stark rushed through the hallways, impaling the first guard that rushed at him. He knew he should have stayed back with the rest of his soldiers, but his fury couldn't be contained. After everything that had happened over the past 2 years, the death of his father and brother, countless soldiers and bannermen that Ned considered his friends, and so many others. Ned couldn't stop now. He knew that Robert wanted to kill the Mad King personally, but Ned wasn't going to let that happen. He was going to have the honor of doing that himself. Robert killed Roriger at the Battle of the Trident and avenged Lionel. Now Ned was going to avenge his father and brother. Another soldier rushed at him, but Ned easily swatted his attacks aside and knocked the man down with a single kick. Lifting his sword up, he plunged ice down through the guard's chest plate and heart. The man gasped before blood coughed out of his mouth. Ned pulled his sword out and continued on. After victory at the Trident, Ned Stark marched their forces to King's Landing before Tywin Lannister reached the city with an army 20,000 strong. Robert was wounded during the last battle and was forced to stay behind. Ned didn't care how long the siege would take, but his family would have justice and no Lannister or city guardsman would stop him now. But to everyone's shock and surprise, Tywin betrayed Aerys Targaryen and attacked the city. Red Keep managed to hold off the attackers from storming their gates until Ned led his own forces into the city and Targaryen's forces were completely overwhelmed. Breaking inside, Ned found himself and his 2 bodyguards ahead of Tywin's forces somehow. Sir Roderick Castle and Howland Reed were 2 of Ned's most trusted soldiers, and they did not protest when Ned rushed ahead of the main forces to get inside. They just simply followed his lead and cut down anyone that tried to attack Ned from behind. All his life Ned was taught to believe in honor and duty. But duty to whom? A madman who butchered Ned's family and called for his head. Ned was the first to join Jon Arryn when he went to war with Robert Baratheon. But right now this wasn't about duty or honor, this was about justice. Ned was going to kill Aerys Targaryen with his own hands. Rounding a corner to the throne room doors, they found 2 corpses of the King's Guard were lying on the floor with their throats slit. Someone had already attacked here. Was it the Lannister forces? They were still trying to secure the castle's lower floors first. Ned kicked the doors open and to his horror, he realized he was too late. Lying sprawled face first on the floor was the silver-haired King Aerys Targaryen covered with blood. Sitting on the Iron Throne was Jaime Lannister, a member of the King's Guard and the only living person in the room. It didn't take a genius to realize what had happened. Jaime had forsaken his vows and killed the man he swore to protect. Ned rushed forward and checked the king's pulse. He nearly screamed in anger when he felt none. Aerys Targaryen was his to kill. It was his duty to avenge his family, his right to kill the Mad King. And now that was taken from him. Lord Eddard Stark. I must say I'm surprised that you're the first person to come running through that door, commented Jaime. Ned glanced upwards at him, barely able to contain his anger. Get down from there, he whispered in a dangerous whisper. Jaime stood up and walked down the steps. Just keeping it warm. You'd be surprised how comfortable it really is. I wanted him dead by my hand, snapped Ned. It was his duty and his right to kill Aerys. And now it was denied by a smug young man who broke his own oath and stabbed the king in the back like a coward. I think he just twitched. Best to take his head off just in case, replied Jaime. He strolled by the corpse, glancing down. He wanted to burn all of King's Landing out of sheer spite. Burn them all, he kept shouting. He kept shouting it even when I put my blade through his spine and blood poured of his mouth. Burn them all. Ned glanced down at the body now, all of his anger and fury fixated on what was the man who murdered his family. He lifted up ice and with a furious cry brought it down on the Mad King's neck. The head rolled past his feet as Ned brought his sword back up. He held back tears as memories of his father and brother surfaced in his mind. And now they were avenged. Feels good, doesn't it? I expect my father will put his head on a pike along with the rest of the Targaryens, spoke Jaime. That's when a new fear came over Ned. Aerys Targaryen deserved to die 1,000 times over for what he did, but his family was innocent. They shouldn't be punished for what someone with the same last name did. Where is the rest of the royal family? Demanded Ned. I'd imagine near the top of Red Keep. They have no way to escape, so. Jaime started to say before Ned rushed out the door. He ran as quickly as he could to the stairs and made his way upwards. Ned knew what kind of a man Tywin Lannister was, and the man would kill the entire royal family in the chaos to make a bid for the Iron Throne. He could not let the entire Targaryen household be butchered. Robert might object to this, but Ned couldn't let it happen. He heard shouting above him, the last stand of the King's Guard defending the royal family. A small group of Lannister soldiers must have broken through the enemy ranks like Ned did. He reached the top of the stairs and found a dozen soldiers trying to push their way into a room at the end of the hall. The man at the front was the largest man Ned had ever seen. Sir Gregor Clegane, the mountain that rides. They broke through and charged into the room, the bodies of the last King's Guard crushed under their feet. Shrieks from both women and children filled the hall as Ned charged after them. "My lord, wait," pleaded Sir Roderick shouted behind him, but he ignored it as he rushed inside. He knocked one soldier aside as he found the mountain backhanding Queen Rolla to the ground. She cowered and lifted her arms to protect her large pregnant belly. Nearby Princess Elia held her daughter Rhaenys and infant Aegon, absolutely terrified. Gregor held up his massive sword and aimed for the queen's belly. "No," shouted Ned as he rushed forward with all his strength and drew ice. He swatted Gregor's blow aside, saving the queen and her unborn child's life. The mountain turned his attention to Ned, his eyes filled with a blood rage like a wild animal. His breathing was loud and frightening. The massive man screamed in mad rage as he swung his sword at Stark. All the soldiers backed away in fear as Ned was forced to back away and defend himself. They also kept Roderick and Reed at bay, drawing their swords and threatening to attack if they intervened. "Stop this madness," shouted Ned. Gregor ignored his orders as he swung again. He had become a wild animal that had been denied his kill, and now he was going to take it out on Ned. Gregor was much stronger, but Ned was faster and more agile. He couldn't fight the mountain in a straight fight, but maybe he didn't have to. With every swing, Gregor seemed to get slower and with less force behind any blow he could connect. He was getting fatigued. Clegane's fight to get here must have exhausted him. But that didn't take away how dangerous he was. He threw a wild swing that nearly connected with Ned's head, but Stark managed to duck underneath it at the last moment. This left Gregor vulnerable for a split second, which Ned utilized. He swung ice and struck a vulnerable weak point near the shoulder pads. Blood began to drip out of the resulting wound, but the large man didn't even seem to notice it. He swung again and Ned struck the other shoulder pad, drawing blood once again. This time Gregor noticed it. The wounds were sapping his strength away as he clutched his sword. "You will not harm them," Ned spoke with conviction. Gregor screamed and charged again, his attack sloppy and easily avoidable. Ned swung the handle of his sword around and smacked it right in the open port on Gregor's helmet. The blow stunned him, allowing Ned to slash at the back of the mountain's left knee. Ice sliced through bone and flesh. The large man screamed in pain before finally dropping to the ground. No longer able to stand, he held up his hands in surrender as his eyes peered into Ned's. "I yield," he growled almost in a whisper. "Be thankful that I believe in mercy," Ned replied. He turned his attention to Gregor's men, who were absolutely shocked. They had probably never seen the mountain defeated before. Roderick and Reed shoved their way through, the soldiers no longer holding them back. "Thank you, my lord," whimpered the queen. Princess Elia and her daughter Rhaenys both had tears in their eyes, but they were also filled with gratitude. Little Aegon cried in his mother's arms. Ned gave each a comforting smile and noticed someone was missing. "Where is Viserys?" "I don't know. The boy disappeared this morning," replied Elia. Then the queen screamed in pain. Ned kneeled down and held her hand. "It's coming," she whispered. "Get me some blankets now," shouted Ned. Some of the soldiers rushed off while the others tended to Sir Gregor. Stark reached past her belly and felt the warm wet sensation of blood. She was hemorrhaging and badly. Something was wrong. "My queen. You're losing a lot of blood," he told her with a look of sorrow. She returned his look with acknowledging tears. If she gave birth now, she was most likely going to die. "What is your name?" she asked. "Eddard Stark of Winterfell," answered Ned. "Please, Lord Stark. Help me through this," Rolla pleaded. He nodded and tried to give her a comforting smile. Roderick rushed to his side with several blankets. Ned took them and prepared himself. "Push my lady," he shouted. Rolla screamed in pain as a small head came out. With another scream, the child was halfway out. A third and final scream were replaced by the cries of a small little girl cradled in Ned Stark's arms. "It's a girl," he whispered. Rolla was completely exhausted and couldn't even lift her hands up to hold her newborn. Ned gently placed the child down in her arms. The queen cradled and quietly shushed her daughter. "Daenerys," she whispered, naming the child. Her eyes closed and her head slumped, completely lifeless. Ned was speechless and for a moment was motionless before he gently pulled the child away and got to his feet. "She's beautiful," Elia said as Ned gently rocked Daenerys back and forth in her arms. "Yes, she is," agreed Ned. Underscore 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 underscore. An hour later the battle was won. King's Landing and Red Keep were taken. The war was over. There were still battles to be won. The Tyrells were laying siege to Storm's End with Stannis Baratheon inside, and the Martells also needed to be brought into line. But Ned had saved Doran Martell's sister Elia and would no doubt show his gratitude by standing down. The Tyrells would also stand down once news of this victory reached their ears. For the moment Ned stood on a balcony looking out over the city of King's Landing. In one day everything had changed. King Aerys was dead and the dynasty his family had built over 3 centuries undone. There was no way the Targaryens would keep control of the Iron Throne after this. Ned had saved their lives, but the great houses would never allow them back into power. He could hear the cheers of the soldiers within the city. News of their victory had reached their ears. He could only imagine soldiers of every house, Lannister, Stark, Arryn, Baratheon, all hugging and congratulating each other. Banners and allegiances meant nothing at the moment. Ned could also hear the sound of footsteps behind him. He glanced to see his old friend and mentor Jon Arryn moving to his side. "I wish Robert were here. This is his victory," sighed Ned. Robert Baratheon had been wounded in his battle with Rhaegar Targaryen and left his forces under Ned's command. "Put a spear through that silver-haired bastard," Robert told him before Stark marched out. "It's also yours. I'm proud of what you did today." "Saving the royal family," said Jon as he stood beside Ned looking at the city below. "They were innocent. They didn't deserve to be caught in Tywin Lannister's power grab," sighed Ned. "But most men wouldn't have challenged the Mountain to save the family of the man who murdered his own. Today you made not just me proud but your father too," Jon said before placing his arm on Ned's shoulder. That meant a lot coming from the man Ned considered to be a second father to him. "What happens now?" asked Ned. "We're assembling our forces to march on Storm's End, but I doubt it will come to that. I sent messenger ravens to every major city. It won't be long before everyone in the 7 kingdoms knows what has happened. We're summoning every head of the great houses to swear fealty to Robert once he arrives," said Jon. "The only thing Robert is going to do when he gets here is drink the largest barrel of ale in the city," smiled Ned. "Well, I suspect he'll have plenty of time for that. It'll take a month at least before the head of every major households arrive," conceded Jon. A page rushed inside the room carrying a letter, a courier no doubt. "Message for you from the Trident, my lord," he said before handing the rolled-up piece of paper. Ned snatched it away and unrolled it. A minute later, he finished reading it and the letter dropped from his hands. "What's wrong?" asked Jon. "Robert is dead. His wounds became infected and he passed away last night," whispered Ned. He couldn't believe how unfair this was. This was the crowning moment of Robert's life, taking the Iron Throne and the 7 kingdoms, only for death to rob him of it all. "This will complicate things," Jon whispered. The sorrow in his voice was apparent, but he was already thinking ahead. "What are you talking about?" asked Ned. "Robert was the one who united our allies. With him gone, I fear that the Lannisters and others will make for a power grab," said Jon. Ned knew that Tywin Lannister wouldn't try to use force to take the Iron Throne. He would try and convince the other houses to swear fealty to him. Stannis may be the heir to House Baratheon, but that doesn't make him the true heir to the throne, and many of the other houses would make that abundantly clear. There's nothing more we can do now but wait and pray to the old gods and the new that Tywin Lannister doesn't sit on the Iron Throne. 1 month had passed since the death of Aerys Targaryen. As Ned suspected, the Tyrells sued for peace once news of the Mad King's death reached their ears. The Martells stood down as well. But the month was also filled with tragedy. Ned later found his sister Lyanna hidden away in the Tower of Joy in Dawn. With 6 companions Ned fought against the greatest knight alive Arthur Dane and his fellow Kingsguard Gerald Hightower and Oswyl Went. Ned and Howland Reed were the only 2 alive when the battle was over. Ned raced inside but he was too late. Lyanna's last words haunted him every night since. "Promise me, Ned." The war was finally over but now an even more important battle was about to begin. Ned's thoughts wandered to Winterfell and how he longed to return to his home. He had seen enough fighting and didn't want to see any more. He just wanted to go home and settle down. Before the war began, his brother Brandon was promised to Catelyn Tully and upon his death Ned married her in his brother's place. Even now Catelyn was caring for their son Robb who was born while Ned was off fighting in the war. Hopefully they would have many more that would drive them crazy. The thought made Ned smile as he waited in the entrance courtyard of the Red Keep for Stannis Baratheon. Every major lord of Westeros had been summoned to take part in the Great Council. Its sole purpose was to decide who will be the next king. Such an event had only occurred once before nearly 70 years ago after the death of Kingmaker's death. The council had chosen Aegon V who ruled wisely but his son Aerys did not. He had brought madness and death to the 7 kingdoms and no one would ever allow a Targaryen on the throne again. The only question now was who would take the Targaryen's place. Ned pondered this question as knights carrying Baratheon banners entered the courtyard. In the front was Stannis Baratheon, his face just as stern as ever. Ned remembered meeting him several times but they were never friendly. "Lord Stannis." "Welcome," Ned greeted the Lord of Storm's End as he dismounted from his horse. "Lord Stark," Stannis replied almost in a grunt. Ned felt awkward speaking to him. Stannis was the complete opposite of his older brother. Robert would drink, celebrate, and laugh. Stannis never smiled, never laughed, and though not a cruel man he was stern and unyielding. "I am sorry about the loss of your brother." "He was a great man," said Ned. "I mourn the boy he was. Not the man he became. I did everything he ever asked. I did my duty as his younger brother and served him faithfully my whole life and not once did he ever thank me for it. Not a single word of gratitude for holding Storm's End for almost a year," declared Stannis. Robert always told Ned how much he loathed spending time with Stannis. They were polar opposites. "He may not have thanked you or said any kind words to you but he always respected you," said Ned. "A true man should speak how he feels. He shouldn't have to let his friends say it for him," said Stannis. The man was clearly bitter over not having his older brother's love. Robert never loved either of his brothers. "Is Renly well?" asked Ned, trying to change the conversation. "Now that he can eat something other than rats." "Before Sir Davos delivered the supplies he was so frail he could barely stand," answered Stannis. Ned heard that a smuggler named Davos Seaworth had broken through the blockade and delivered supplies to Storm's End. Stannis had rewarded him with a knighthood but also cut off 4 of Davos's fingers. Stern and unyielding. "I saw Tyrell soldiers camped outside the city walls. Why Mace Tyrell and Doran Martell are given a seat on this council is beyond me. They fought against us, they lost, and now you would give them a voice in whomever is crowned," commented Stannis. Every great lord was permitted to keep a force of 500 men outside the city walls and it was not the most stable arrangement. Many of these men had fought against the other, many lost friends, and now they were told to sit peacefully within each other's sights. "Jon Arryn believes that every lord must have a say in this in order for there to be a true lasting peace," answered Ned. The truth was he was uneasy about bringing in the same people that had once swore allegiance to Aerys Targaryen but Jon Arryn said that it needed to be done if every peace was to be forged and last. "And what do you think?" frowned Stannis. "It does not matter what I think. I will do whatever is best for the realm," answered Ned. "What is best for the realm is for me to be crowned. You and Jon Arryn swore to serve Robert when he fought for the Iron Throne. He won and now everything that was his is now mine by right. And you are giving a voice to the people who tried to starve me in Storm's End," said Stannis. "Aerys is dead. There's no further reason for bloodshed," said Ned. "There is for justice. For the men who fought and died beside Robert, you, and me. They deserve justice against everyone who fought against them," said Stannis. He walked off with his honor guards, leaving a somewhat shaken Ned. Stannis would never forgive anyone who fought against them, even if that meant continuing the war. But by all rights Stannis was the rightful heir of Robert, whom Ned fought to put on the Iron Throne. Ned was starting to miss Winterfell with each passing day. King's Landing was a rat's nest filled with treachery and betrayal. In the north, honor and family meant more than anything. But here everything was about gaining power and maintaining it. He was tempted just to leave and go back home. Let the High Lords settle this themselves. Ned wanted no part in any of this. Lord Stark, a deep familiar voice behind him. Ned turned to see the Lord of Casterly Rock and Warden of the West, Tywin Lannister. The man was the embodiment of power whose intelligence was only matched by his ambition. He was so wealthy that it was often joked that the man shit gold, though no one ever dared say it to his face. Lord Tywin Ned greeted him as he tried to contain his anger. He wanted the Lannister to pay for his attempt to murder the royal family, but that would only make things worse. The peace was barely stable as it was. With Lord Stannis here, that just leaves Prince Doran to reach us before the fate of Westeros is decided, stated Tywin. Do you have a point? Demanded Ned. Tywin glared at him with his cold eyes. Ned had never heard of the man losing his temper, instead he would just stare with those eyes. Most men would rather fight the mountain than have those eyes staring at them. Ned, however, was not afraid. I overheard what Stannis intends to do. He will start the war all over again, and for what? His own foolish ideals of justice. Can the Seven Kingdoms afford such a man to sit on the Iron Throne? Asked Tywin. And whom do you suggest? Someone who sat back throughout the entire war and only struck when he knew which side would win. A man who ordered the death of 2 innocent children, replied Ned. A man who brought 20 prosperous years to the Seven Kingdoms while he was the hand of the king. A man who is willing to do whatever it takes to secure stability and order. I cannot say the same about Stannis, Tywin spoke. I will never support a man like you, Ned spat. The realm needs men like me. Had I not taken this city through treachery, the war would have dragged on for years. And now you have given every Targaryen loyalist a rally point by leaving Rhaegar's children and Aerys' daughter alive. And should another rebellion begin, the blood of whomever is spilled will be on your head, said Tywin. He turned and left a fuming Ned. Underscore 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 underscore. Ned left the courtyard and headed to the Godswood. He needed to clear his head, and nothing else seemed to ease his mind than sitting in front of the heart tree and praying to the old gods. Most people in Westeros prayed the Seven, but the Northerners still held the beliefs of their ancestors. Most Godswood in the south was used as gardens instead of places of worship, but Ned never saw anyone other than his own bannermen pray here. A part of him was grateful for the seclusion it brought him. What are you praying for? Asked a gentle voice. Ned looked up to see Princess Elia standing beside him. He had been so lost in his thoughts that he didn't even hear her coming. My wife and son are on their way from Riverrun. I'm praying that they will arrive safely, Princess answered Ned. You don't need to call me that anymore. We both know I won't be keeping the title for much longer, said Elia. How are Rhaenys and Aegon? Ned asked. Elia sighed. Aegon is well, but Rhaenys still has nightmares about what happened. She screams in the middle of the night for her father even though I have told her he is gone. I'm sorry for everything you'd had to endure. You and your children shouldn't suffer because of Aerys and Rhaegar, said Ned. Elia gave him a thankful smile for his words. I loved him once. Rhaegar was the envy of every woman in the Seven Kingdoms, but he was my husband. I gave him 2 beautiful children he loved, and yet he never loved me. He might have enjoyed my company, I suppose, at times, but never love. I knew the truth at Harrenhal when he gave your sister the crown of flowers instead of me, said Elia. Ned remembered the first time he met Rhaegar. It was during the tourney of Harrenhal while Ned was speaking to Brandon, Lyanna, and Robert when the prince approached them. He seemed to be a kind man, but Ned noticed that he couldn't take his eyes off Lyanna and she couldn't stop looking back at him. He should have said something, acted on his instincts. Instead he did nothing and Lyanna was dead. Lord Stark. Elia started to say, her voice desperate. When my brother arrives, you and every other High Lord will decide whom to crown. And in doing so you will be deciding the fate of my children. Whoever sits on the Iron Throne will want no rivals to his claim, and should someone like Tywin Lannister or Stannis Baratheon be crowned, Rhaenys and Aegon will be killed. It is for their sake that I beg you to claim the Iron Throne. Ned couldn't believe what she was saying. He had no claim to the Iron Throne, nor did he want it. The Baratheons had the true claim with their Targaryen ancestry. Something the Starks did not. No, I can't, protested Ned. You must. My brother has no chance of gaining the throne. Jon Arryn is a good man, but he doesn't want to be crowned. I don't trust Mace Tyrell, Hoster Tully, or Balon Greyjoy, and my children are as good as dead if Tywin or Stannis becomes king, pleaded Elia. Ruling 7 fractured kingdoms is not a responsibility I want to put on my family. If I become king, every ambitious and power-hungry lunatic would target them just as they did the Targaryens. I am not fit to rule regardless. Ned shook his head. That's where you are wrong, Lord Stark. You are the only man who is fit to rule. Tywin is a power-hungry man who would gladly kill anyone who gets in his way. Stannis is apathetic to the lives of others around him. Mace Tyrell is just plain stupid, and my brother cannot win this throne no matter how hard he tried. You and Jon Arryn are the only ones among the council that don't want the throne. Jon is a good leader, but he does not inspire greatness as you do. You challenged the mountain to protect your enemy's family. Would anyone else have done what you did? If you won't do it for the sake of my children, then do it for the good of the realm, said Elia. Ned said nothing. He stared at the heart tree thinking. I should go and check on Aegon. Please think about what I've said, Elia told him before she left. Underscore 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 underscore. When Ned got back to his room, he walked out onto the balcony and looked over the city. It was still reeling from Tywin's attack. Though Ned's army managed to minimize some of the damage by keeping Tywin's forces at bay, hundreds, possibly thousands, were dead. How can knights and men who claim to worship the Seven and took oaths to do good commit such brutality? The same could be said about Aerys Targaryen and his madness. Rhaegar Targaryen could have been a great king. He was loved by the common people and a kind man by all accounts. And yet he too fell into the trap of power. When you are given a crown and unlimited power, why does it always seem to change a man for the worse? Was it simply power itself that changed someone, or did it just simply bring out something inside that was always there? Stannis saw the Iron Throne as his right. Tywin saw it as the ultimate prize. Both of them wanted power, and Ned knew it would not end well for the Seven Kingdoms if either of them got their wish. War and bloodshed would follow, and more lives would be lost, all for a damned metal chair. And what of Rhaenys, Aegon, and Daenerys? They are innocent, and if he put someone on the Iron Throne that will kill them, that would make Ned just as guilty. How could he live with himself? I never wanted this, Ned whispered to himself. A knock on the door made him clench his fist. All he wanted right now was to be left alone. Come in, he groaned. He was pleasantly surprised when Jon Arryn entered. Prince Doran has arrived. The council will meet tomorrow, announced Jon. He stared at Ned for a moment. And you look like you haven't slept in days. Perhaps because I haven't, sighed Ned. I think I know you well enough to know there's more to it than that, spoke Jon as he took a seat. Ned sat down as well. What's really bothering you? Who will you support tomorrow? Asked Ned. Truthfully, I don't know. I won't support Tywin, but perhaps maybe Stannis. He had a real claim to the throne and he was on our side during the war, shrugged Jon. And what happens if he commands us to rally our troops and march against House Tyrell and House Martell? Asked Ned. What makes you so sure he'll do that? Frowned Jon. He told me, answered Ned. Jon sighed as he held his hand against his forehead. The two were silent for a moment before Ned broke the silence. Have you ever wished someone else was Lord of the Vale and not you? He asked. Sometimes, yes, admitted Jon. But it's not about what I want. I have a duty to protect or govern the people of the Vale to the best of my abilities. As the firstborn son of my father, I had no choice in the matter, but I decided that I would try to always do what was right. Just as when I joined you and Robert's rebellion, not just because I loved both of you as if you were my own children, but also because it was the right thing to do. I'm starting to wonder what the right thing truly is," said Ned. "Do whatever you think is right tomorrow, Ned. I can't tell you what that is or whom to choose. But you are the most honorable man I have ever met, and I know you'll do the right thing no matter what you decide. Now get some rest," said John. Underscore 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 underscore. In the morning, Ned stared at a mirror for what seemed like hours. He had fought dozens of battles, but those were won by swords, armor, and training. Now he was dressed for a different kind of battle, where words were the weapons and allegiances changed like the tides. The war of politics. Ned straightened his brown leather tunic as he prepared for the most important meeting to take place in centuries. The throne room had been redesigned to hold a table with 8 chairs where the head of every major household would sit and discuss the future of Westeros. Ned Stark of the North, Jon Arryn of the Vale, Tywin Lannister of the Westernlands, Mace Tyrell of the Reach, Stannis Baratheon of the Stormlands, Doran Martell of Dorne, and Hoster Tully of the Riverlands. Balon Greyjoy of the Iron Islands was summoned but had not arrived. Ned doubted he would even show up from the start. The man always believed himself to be outside of the king's authority even before Robert's rebellion. Ned walked outside his room where Roderick and Reed were waiting for him. They were armed, but Ned doubted that would be necessary. No one would dare strike anyone in a meeting like this. "Are you ready, my lord?" asked Reed. "Let's go," nodded Ned. He followed them to the throne room. 2 guards outside the doors for them as the 3 stepped inside. The throne room looked very different from when Ned had severed the Mad King's head on the floor. The dragon skulls that had hung on the walls were smashed on the floor, and a large table sat in the middle of the room. Jon Arryn, Tywin Lannister, and Hoster Tully were already waiting with their squires and 2 guards for each of them. They were allowed to bring no one else to the meeting. Ned gave Jon a nod before taking a seat. Tywin eyed him silently from his seat, no doubt pondering what Stark will say in the proceedings. For the first time in almost 100 years, all the great houses would decide who the next king would be. Which meant everyone needed to know who would swear fealty to whom. The 2 finally broke their stares as Mace Tyrell walked in with his servants, with Doran Martell right behind him. The last man to enter was Stannis Baratheon. When he took his seat, the throne room doors shut and would stay that way until a new king was decided. No one was leaving until then. "Welcome, my lords. Aerys Targaryen is dead and his dynasty never to return. We are here to decide who shall take his place and ensure that a madman does not sit on the Iron Throne again," said Jon Arryn. "There is nothing to decide. My brother was to sit on the Iron Throne, and now that he is dead, that right belongs to me," said Stannis. "If it weren't for the Lannisters and the Starks, you'd still be starving in Storm's End," spat Mace. The leader of House Tyrell was not about to swear fealty to a man he would have defeated had news of the Mad King's death not reached his ears. "The noble houses sworn to us are also looking to us for leadership. They will want to see a man they know they can trust to run this kingdom efficiently and rationally," agreed Tywin. "And I assume you're referring to yourself. A Lannister always pays his debts, right? You can be sure one day I'll repay you for trying to kill my sister and her children," snapped Doran Martell. The Martells knew that Tywin ordered the Mountain to kill the royal family, which included Princess Elia, Doran's sister. "My lords, please calm down," Jon said, trying to ease tensions, but it wasn't working. The Lannisters stood back and did nothing during the war. They only got involved when they knew Robert would win. They also entered King's Landing under a banner of friendship before attacking it. "Do you expect us to trust you with the Iron Throne after that, Tywin?" nodded Hoster. "You stood back and let the rest of us do most of the fighting," Foster snapped Stannis. "Fighting? You sat on your ass in Storm's End for a year," shouted Hoster. "At least I have the resources and the loyalty of my banners. Which is more than I can say for you, Stannis." "I hear that you're having difficulty keeping your nobles in line," replied Tywin. Stannis glared at him. For the next hour, insults and shouts were exchanged in the room. Not everyone nominated themselves for the Iron Throne, but no one agreed on any choice. Another idea occurred that the 7 kingdoms should be independent of each other, but that idea was shot down. The men in this room weren't about to let the chance of being king of all 7 kingdoms pass them by. The whole time Ned was silent, secretly wishing he was somewhere else. He loathed this Game of Thrones. At least on a battlefield he knew who his enemies and allies were. He also loathed what he was about to do next. "My lords," Ned spoke, his voice cutting through the banter among the others and silencing them. "We need someone who we know can keep his word and follow the rule of law. Someone who can take the role of king as a duty instead of a right. Every king is called protector of the realm, and we need someone who will act like it. Who will put what is best for the 7 kingdoms instead of his own selfish ambitions," spoke Ned. "Do you have anyone in particular in mind?" asked Jon. "I nominate myself," sighed Ned. Mace rolled his eyes in annoyance and Tywin seemed to do the same. Hoster and Jon were in shock while Doran stared at him. Stannis was furious. This was a gamble on Ned's part, but he felt it was the right thing to do. "Explain yourself," demanded Stannis. The whole room was silent. Ned had their full attention. "I don't have the gold of House Lannister or the claim of House Baratheon. All I have to offer all of you is my honor, and that I vow I would do everything in my power should I be crowned to establish peace to the 7 kingdoms and end the bloodshed. I will raise my children to treat the throne as a burden and not a right," he said. While Tywin and Stannis were unmoved, Jon gave Ned a nod and Hoster seemed to do so as well. Mace Tyrell seemed changed also. "House Martell swears fealty to Lord Eddard Stark. Though you were my enemy, you saved my sister and her children. You are a man of honor and someone whose word I can trust," spoke Doran. That caught everyone off guard except Ned. He suspected that Elia would convince Doran to support him. "I agree. House Arryn swears fealty to him and no other," smiled Jon. "If someone who was once your sworn enemy trusts you, then that's saying something. If Stannis or Tywin promised no retribution against my house, I wouldn't believe either of them. But if you promise no retribution would come to my family for fighting against you, I would believe you, Lord Stark." "House Tyrell swears fealty to you and no one else," said Mace. "I suppose you're right. House Tully chooses Lord Stark," conceded Hoster. Tywin and Stannis were completely speechless. They had to have known it would be difficult to gain support for themselves, but Ned suspected they didn't think the rest would agree on someone unanimously like this. Ned knew that Doran would support him for saving Elia and her children. By being married to Catelyn, he would gain Hoster's support. Jon Arryn almost seemed like he was just waiting for Ned to step up. And Ned said he would bring peace to the realm, which caught Mace Tyrell's interest. The Lord of Highgarden was probably fearful of retribution on Stannis's part and didn't trust Tywin. Hearing Doran, once Ned's sworn enemy, swear fealty to him convinced Mace that Ned could be trusted. "This is insanity. He has no claim to the Iron Throne," shouted Stannis. "Neither do you. The Targaryen blood in your veins does not you make fit to be a king," shot back Tywin, knowing which way the momentum had shifted. He took a deep breath. "Eddard Stark will have House Lannister's support." And all eyes turned to Stannis. He knew he couldn't win the Iron Throne. Nothing he said would change that. He was an unyielding man, but even he knew he couldn't fight 6 of the other 7 kingdoms. Not when he was still having trouble with his own bannermen. All he could do now was simply say, "House Baratheon swears fealty to Eddard Stark." "It is decided then. We need to send messengers to all of our bannermen and let them know that a new king will be crowned." "Long may he reign," said Jon. Ned paced back and forth in his quarters later that night. What has he done? He had decided to try and claim the Iron Throne the night before the council, and yet now that he had won, doubt began to creep into his mind. He had just put a burden on himself, Robb, and every one of their descendants. Ned thought he was the right man to be king among the council, but was he truly the best man for the role? A knock on the door interrupted his thoughts. "Enter," said Ned. It opened as Jon Arryn stepped inside. "Most people would be celebrating upon hearing the news that they will become king," commented Jon. "I didn't want to become king, Jon. I know what I said back in the throne room, but the truth is I don't want the Iron Throne," said Ned as he continued his pacing. For the first time in his life he was truly afraid. He was nervous whenever he charged into battle, but never truly afraid. Being crowned, however, made him more afraid than charging against any foe. "Calm down and breath before you wear out the floor," sighed Jon. Ned stopped and took a deep breath. That's better. Now tell me why you sought to be king even if you didn't want to. Jon took a seat but Ned remained on his feet, refusing to sit. I was afraid of what would happen if anyone else was crowned. I was thinking about the people in King's Landing who died when Tywin attacked, my men who would be forced to fight in Stannis' war, and I was thinking about Elya's children and Daenerys. I just couldn't get any of their faces out of my head last night, said Ned. Well, that's a noble reason, at least, shrugged Jon. But now I'm not so sure. I don't know if I can do this. For the first time in my life I'm afraid, admitted Ned. That's good. It means you're not stupid, remarked Jon as he got to his feet. The Targaryens ruled with fear, treachery, and arrogance. The Starks are about to become a dynasty, and unless you learn from the Targaryens' mistakes, your children will simply repeat them. Ned was silent, pondering over every possible decision and command he might have to make. Knighting someone or stripping someone of title. To march to war or make peace. To grant mercy or to punish. So much power and so much responsibility. If I am to be king, then I'm going to need a good hand, said Ned. I'm not worthy of such an honor, said Jon, shaking his head. Damn it, old man. You can't expect me to become king of 7 kingdoms and not need your help. And by the gods, I need your help now more than ever, snapped Ned. Jon smiled. I'd be your hand whether you'd asked or demanded it. The two were interrupted by a knock on the door. Enter, Ned said. One of Ned's guard, Hollis, entered the room. Pardon me, my lords, but Lady Catelyn and Lysa have arrived, he said. Ned knew the two were on their way here but didn't expect them tonight. Take us to them, said Ned. Hollis nodded and escorted them out. Gods, Ned. Lysa is a child compared to me. I feel so sorry for her to be bartered by her father the way she was, sighed Jon. Marrying Lysa was the price Jon had to pay for Hoster's troops. Ned always respected Hoster as a good family man but dangerous too. During the war against Aes, several riverlords defied Hoster's command and Hoster repaid their treachery by putting entire villages to the sword. Thanks the gods he was on their side. The two made their way to the entrance courtyard where an envoy was disembarking from their wagons. Jory Castle, Sir Roderick's nephew, had led the honor guard that protected them and helped Lysa down off the wagon. While Jon moved off to meet with her, Ned's eyes were fixated on Catelyn, who was already approaching him holding a sleeping boy in her arms. Ned was a loss of words as he stepped forward and looked at his son's face for the very first time. For nearly 2 years, he had fought against the Targaryens to avenge his father, brother, and to rescue his sister. Not once did he ever go to visit Cat in Riverrun in that time. They had been married hastily and only spent one night together before Ned had to march off to war. 9 months later, Catelyn gave birth to a healthy baby boy and wrote to him to name suggestions. They came to an agreement on Robb. How the child's future has changed so quickly. He was supposed to be the future Lord of Winterfell, but now he will be Lord of the 7 Kingdoms. May I hold him? Asked Ned. Cat gave him a smile and handed the boy over to him. His eyes opened as he looked at his father's face for the first time. Ned was unsure of what to say, and yet it didn't seem to matter as Robb smiled. Underscore 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 underscore. If someone had told Catelyn a year ago that she would be queen, she would have called it madness. She could scarcely believe the news when she first heard it when she and Lysa's envoy stopped at an inn to rest. Catelyn thought it was some tall tale conceived by the locals. There was so much confusion following the end of the war that no one truly knew who the king was now. And yet when they reached King's Landing and were escorted by hundreds of Stark and Arryn soldiers through the streets, the tall tale had become a reality. For 2 years she prayed for her husband to be safe and come back alive to help her raise Robb. Her prayers weren't answered the way she thought they would be. Lysa nearly screamed for joy when Ned's ascension was confirmed. "Sister, you're going to be a queen," she had exclaimed. Cat wished she could be as happy as her sister. For the moment, she simply followed Ned as he carried Robb inside. The two had exchanged a simple greeting, but Robb was so tired he could barely keep his eyes open. They took the boy to their room in Maegor's Holdfast and got him settled in. After he was sound asleep, Ned took Catelyn outside into the hallway. I wasn't expecting you two here so soon, he told her. We made good time. By the seven gods, Ned, your coronation is in 3 days, said Caitlin. Everything was happening so fast that she had barely come to terms with it all. Ned a king and Kat his queen. It almost seemed like some dream she hadn't awakened from yet. I didn't want this, said Ned. And yet it is happening regardless, replied Caitlin. I never wanted this responsibility to be put on us, our children, or their children, sighed Ned. When he was crowned, he would seal his fate and that of Rob's and every Stark yet to come. They would be part of a dynasty that needed to keep the peace in the Seven Kingdoms. A responsibility only a man like you can live up to. I can't remember the last time a man of honor sat on the Iron Throne. Truthfully, I don't want to be queen, but if this is the path you've decided, then I will follow, Caitlin encouraged him. At least that seemed to comfort her husband. What about the Targaryen children, she asked. Ned motioned for her to follow her down the hallway. Rhaenys and Aegon will remain in King's Landing for now along with their mother, said Ned. They cannot be allowed to leave, Ned. I know they are innocent, but they will become a rallying point that all of your enemies will gather around to challenge your claim to the throne, said Caitlin. She hated to say the words, but all she could think about was Rob. What if one day one of the Rhaegar's children raised a rebellion and killed her son? I will not let any harm come to them, stated Ned. Of course he wouldn't. He was a man of honor, not a butcher like Tywin Lannister. I know you won't, and I am glad. I married an honorable man, replied Caitlin. Ned gave her a thankful smile for understanding before entering a guest room. Inside were 2 crypts with 2 midwives seated next to them. Caitlin was confused as she followed her husband inside. Sleeping in the cradles was 2 infant children, a boy and a girl. We're going to take care of both of them, said Ned. Who are they? Asked Caitlin. The girl is Daenerys Targaryen, heir's only remaining child. Her mother died giving birth to her, Ned explained as he stared at the sleeping child. Taking care of a Targaryen. She heard how he risked his life to protect Rhaegar's children and wasn't surprised. But raising Aerys' daughter as if she were his own did not sit well with her. And the other? Caitlin asked. Ned was silent for a moment as he stared at the boy. Lyanna's son, he finally answered. That was all he needed to say before Caitlin understood it all. Lyanna was abducted by Rhaegar Targaryen and was missing for nearly 2 years. More than enough time for her to conceive a bastard son. I find him in Lyanna's arms as she was dying. I promised I could keep him safe. Caitlin felt the same fear around the 2 babes as she did of the Targaryen children. Any one of them could be a threat to Rob and any other children she and Ned will have. Ned, don't ask me to be a mother to these 2. I know they are 2 innocent children, but I also know that they are 2 potential threats to our son, Caitlin protested. They have no one else. The boy's blood is Stark and of the North. And I was there when Daenerys entered this world, the first person to hold her and hushed her when she cried. I'm not asking you to be their mother, but I am asking you to accept this, said Ned. Caitlin didn't bother trying to convince him to change his mind. In the end he was right. Perhaps Rob growing up with other children his own age would do him good. You never told me your nephew's name, Caitlin said. Lyanna never told me his name before she died, replied Ned. Then the perfect name came to her and it was completely obvious. John. Call him John, Caitlin said, naming him after Ned's mentor and friend. Her husband smiled in agreement. John. Underscore 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 underscore. In the early morning of dawn, preparations were already underway as servants were preparing for a banquet following Ned's coronation. Stewards were fashioning direwolf banners all along the route Ned would ride to the steps of the Great September. Only they were not the banners of his ancestors. A new sigil was fashioned upon news of his ascension. A golden direwolf with a crown resting on top of its head in front of a black field. This was the new banner for the royal family. Ned watched all of this from his solar near the top of the Red Keep. The fear he felt today surpassed anything he ever experienced. Riding into the enemy lines at the Battle of the Trident was an easy thing for him to do. He was more nervous asking Ashura Dane for a dance at Harrenhal than fighting a battle. It was terrible what eventually happened to her. Then his wedding day came when he married Caitlin Tully, a woman he had never met before and was supposed to marry his older brother Brandon. That had been the most terrifying moment in his life until today. He thought of his old friend Robert and how he was going to miss the large man's sense of humor. At least Robert would be spared from sitting on the Iron Throne. Ned knew the man never wanted to be king. He just wanted to live life to the fullest, and you couldn't do that with a crown on your head. At least he died in a victorious battle just like the man always wanted to. "Lord Stark. Your brother Benjen to see," called out Hollis outside in the hallway. "Send him in," replied Ned. His younger brother stepped inside and the two embraced. "Gods, Ned. I leave you alone too long and now you've got everybody calling you king." "If I had left you alone much longer people would be worshipping you as one of the seven," laughed Benjen as they separated. Ned was happy to hear his brother's jokes once again. "The coronation was scheduled so quickly." "I was afraid you wouldn't make it," said Ned. "And miss my brother getting his ass kissed by every great lord in Westeros." "I wouldn't miss it for the world," chuckled Benjen. While Ned appreciated his brother's humor, he needed an answer to a question that had plagued his mind ever since the Great Council. "Do you think I'm right man for this? There has to be someone better." "If there was someone better you would have already told everyone and tell them to crown him instead of you," answered Benjen. "If only," sighed Ned. "You are the best man for the job. Mostly because you don't want it. I didn't want to Lord of Winterfell while you were off fighting the Mad King, but I did it regardless. And everyone tells me I'm going a good job so far. I guess not wanting something makes you appreciate it more," shrugged Benjen. "Funny how that works," chuckled Ned. "The gods sometimes do have a strange sense of humor," agreed Benjen. The topic changed to something Ned would prefer not to talk about, but it needed to be done. "Is the tomb prepared for her?" he asked. Benjen sighed. "I've commissioned a few stone carvers to make a statue in her image. Lyanna deserves a burial as great as any of the kings of winter." Ned wished he'd take his father and Brandon back as well, but the Mad King had left nothing to find. Father had burned to ashes and Brandon's body had been thrown into the dog pen. The Mad King thought it was funny as the animals ate the corpse. Ned wished that Aerys could live again just so he could kill the man personally. Jaime Lannister had taken that from him. "I wish I could go with you when you lay her to rest, but I can't leave so soon after my coronation. There are so many things that need to be resolved and—" Ned said, his voice trailing off. He felt guilty on his decision, but a true king wouldn't abandon his duties when he was needed most. "You don't need to explain it. Father always said duty comes first," said Benjen. "Speaking of which, you once told me you wanted to join the Night's Watch." Ned changed the conversation. "Winterfell needed a new lord and there was only one Stark left to take it. That was when I thought you'd be coming back to Winterfell, but things have obviously changed since then," nodded Benjen. Clearly he knew what Ned was about to ask. "I can't go home now." "Winterfell and the North are yours now," said Ned. "Gee thanks," groaned Benjen. He never wanted to be a lord, but he would do his duty. After all, he was Stark of Winterfell. "How's Cat handling all of this?" "She's about as eager to be queen as I am to king, but she'll do it well." "You do realize since you're getting Winterfell you'll need to get married," chuckled Ned. Benjen frowned. "You're just a fountain of good news today." Ned also told him about Daenerys and Jon. Benjen seemed uncomfortable about his brother's decision. "Are you sure you want to raise our nephew in this snake's pit you called a capital? Let me take Jon back to Winterfell and raise him in the snows of the north where he belongs." Ned was at least thankful that his brother wanted to care for the boy. "I promised Lyanna that I would personally take care of him." "I know you mean well, but he stays here," said Ned. "Fine, but you better send him and Robb to Winterfell every once in a while. Otherwise I'll go insane being the only Stark in the north," said Benjen. "I promise," agreed Ned. The door opened as Caitlin stepped inside holding Robb. Benjen smiled and approached them. "And who is this?" he asked. Robb instantly cowered and hugged his mother tighter. "I'm sorry. He's doesn't warm up to new people so quickly," apologized Caitlin. "He smiled when he first saw me," pointed out Ned. "That's because you were probably giving him funny faces. You always used to give them to Lyanna and me whenever we were eating and we always made a mess," chuckled Benjen. The two brothers laughed. "Why don't you give it a try yourself?" suggested Ned. Benjen gave Rob several goofy-looking faces which seemed only to confuse him. Benjen then gave Rob the raspberries which made the boy giggle hysterically. Then both Stark brothers made the noise which made Rob giggle even louder. "Gods, I'm the only adult in this family," sighed Caitlin. Lord Stark Hollis cried out. "Messenger from Jonnarin to see you." "Send him in," ordered Ned. A young page entered the room. "Lord Stark. Lord Arryn says that preparations are complete and that it is time," he reported. "Give us a moment," said Ned. The page left the room as Eddard turned to his wife and brother. They both gave him a nod. Ned turned and took a deep breath. There was no turning back after this. "Winter is coming," he whispered to himself, to remember that things may be going well now but things always get worse before they better. Underscore 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 underscore. The coronation began at noon in the Great September of Baelor. Thousands had assembled outside to witness the event, with common folk in the back, city guard and men-at-arms in the middle, and lords in the front. Ned Stark stood on the steps of the Great September where the massive stage had been assembled. Standing in the center was the High Septon holding a golden crown crusted with rubies and black diamonds. The High Lords Jon Arryn, Tywin Lannister, Mace Tyrell, Stannis Baratheon, Hoster Tully, and Doran Martell all stood on the balcony as well, along with Caitlin, Robb, Lysa, and Benjen. Eddard Stark stepped forward, spoke the High Septon. The whole square was completely silent as Ned Stark took 3 steps and dropped to one knee in front of the priest. "Will you solemnly promise and swear to rule the kingdoms of Dorne, Westernlands, the Reach, Stormlands, Riverlands, the Vale, the Iron Islands, and the North according to their respective laws and customs?" "I solemnly promise and swear to do so," said Ned, reciting the lines he practiced. Every coronation had the same words spoken every time a Targaryen took the Iron Throne, dating back to Aegon the Conqueror. Except now a Stark was going to sit on the throne. "Will you promise to rule with law and justice and in mercy to be executed in all your judgments?" asked the High Septon. "I will," answered Ned. "Do you promise to protect the faith of the Seven, the old gods, the drowned god, and all other faiths of your subjects?" asked the High Septon. Not exactly the most popular part for the priest to ask, but by law everyone was entitled to worship in whatever religion they wished. "All this I promise to do and swear before gods and men," spoke Ned. "Then in the sight of gods and men I hereby bestow upon and present you as Eddard of House Stark, the first of his name, King of the Andals, the Rhoynar, and the First Men, Lord of the 7 Kingdoms, and Protector of the Realm," announced the High Septon as he set the crown upon Ned's head. Ned stood up and turned around to the crowd. "Long live the king!" shouted someone. Then someone else shouted it as well, and then another, and soon thousands of voices shouted the words as they echoed across the entire city. The banquet preceding the coronation would have made Robert Baratheon proud. King Eddard Stark sat at the royal table with his new crown still resting on his head. Caitlin sat next to him on his right side and Jon Arryn on his left. Also at the table were Lysa, Benjen, and Hoster. While everyone drank and ate endlessly, Ned's plate was untouched. He didn't really have an appetite at the moment, and truthfully he never liked parties. They always reminded Ned of the people he had lost. Robert's drunken songs, Brandon's drinking games, father's jokes that would cause the entire room to erupt with laughter, all of them gone. "Try to at least look like you're having a good time. They may not be looking at you directly, but everyone is watching you," Jon whispered to him. "I shouldn't even be here. There's so much work to be done. I need to appoint new members of the Kingsguard, get my household guards and stewards in order, and deal with the prisoner," said Ned. And by dealing with prisoner he meant Jaime Lannister. Right now the eldest son of Tywin Lannister was sitting in the Traitor's Walk, confined to one of the larger rooms often used for highborn captives. "Work that can be done tomorrow. Right now enjoy yourself, put on a smile. If not for yourself then at least for Cat. She's nervous enough as it is," whispered Jon. Caitlin was far better when it came to this. She had spoken to numerous lords and knights who congratulated her on her husband's coronation. Ned had never met his wife until a few days before their wedding and then didn't see her again for almost 2 years. He had no idea how she would handle the responsibility of being queen. But so far she held her own. Though she often spoke of her own doubts of the role in private, Caitlin seemed completely confident now. She put on a better mask than Ned ever could. Numerous people approached him and each had their own topic they wanted to discuss. Several lords including Mace Tyrell wanted to discuss their land disputes. Apparently they believed that a new king was a good opportunity to try and seize new lands for themselves. He refused to make any such decision until he had time to hear from both sides. That answer drove almost everyone away. But as soon as Ned saw Prince Oberyn Martell approaching, he knew the Red Viper was not interested in lands. "Congratulations on your coronation, Your Grace. You are truly one of the few worthy to sit on the Iron Throne," Oberyn said as he bowed his head. Ned noted how he said few worthy. "You have my thanks," said Ned, trying to be civil. "And you have mine. For saving my sister's life and her children I owe a debt I hope one day I can repay," said Oberyn. That actually sounded genuine. Not that Ned expected otherwise, but the Red Viper was not a man known for making such a promise. Perhaps the man felt few deserved it. "Right now all I want for the realm to be at peace," replied Ned. "It looks like you've already achieved your goal. Most of these High Lords were at each other's throats almost a month ago and now here they are drinking and joking and plotting with one another," commented Oberyn. "Is there something you need?" asked Ned. He doubted Oberyn approached him just to say thank you. "Rhaenys is still having nightmares about the mountain. My sister has tried everything from changing her rooms to even giving her small amounts of dream wine. Nothing seems to help her sleep. Perhaps if I take her to the water gardens in Dorne and away from this palace where Gregor attempted to kill her, the nightmares will go away," explained Oberyn. While Ned did feel sympathy for Rhaenys, the moment Oberyn mentioned taking his niece away Ned was suspicious. It wasn't like this was an unreasonable request. Ned would probably do the same if it were one of his own family. And he would have probably allowed Oberyn to take the young Targaryen princess if he were still just a lord of Winterfell. But things were different now. If Ned allows Rhaenys to leave, her family would make sure she would never be found. She would grow up in hiding and perhaps one day even used as justification by someone to take the Iron Throne from the Starks. "Do you take me for a fool? If I send her with you, she'll never come back," Ned said. Oberyn's eyes betrayed nothing, but the fact that he wasn't outraged from Ned's tone said everything. "I promise she will never be used to raise a rebellion against you, Your Grace," said Oberyn. "And I think you mean it. But if Rhaenys is married and has children, can you make the same promise of them? It might not be in our lifetimes, but her descendants will one day rise up against my family. If there's one thing I'm absolutely certain of is that people who want power will always try to take it. Just as the bastard demon Blackfyr tried to take the throne from the Targaryens the first chance he could," declared Ned. "I thought you were the noble Ned Stark my sister always talked about. Instead I meet a paranoid man who only cares about keeping his power. Maybe you just kept my nephew and niece alive just so everyone could believe your hype," snapped Oberyn. People were already starting to notice their argument. Ned could have him punished for saying such a thing, but that's not who he was. He wasn't the Mad King. "I care about my son and his sons. I care for the people who will be killed in another civil war and I will not have any of their blood on my hands. I'm sorry for Rhaenys and I will do everything I can to make sure she is safe and comfortable. But I will not let her leave with you," Ned said firmly. He made sure everyone around them could hear that. Oberyn glared at his king for a moment until he noticed the looks he was getting from some of the other guests in the room. "Forgive me, Your Grace. I'm ill-tempered and often speak before thinking," he said, bowing his head. "There is nothing to forgive," replied Ned. "If you'll excuse me I'll take my leave." Oberyn bowed again before leaving. Ned's eyes followed him as he left the room. He certainly didn't make a friend of the Red Viper today. "A wise move, Your Grace," commented Tywin. The Lord of Casterly Rock had been standing behind Ned the whole time and the king never knew it. The way he said "Your Grace" sounded almost laughable, as if to tell Ned that he was the one with real power. The Red Viper they call him, and it's not just because of his knowledge of poisons. Every word out of his mouth is venom. "He just wants his niece to be safe," replied Ned. "His niece will never be safe, nor her brother. For as long as they live, they will the envy of every ambitious lord in the Seven Kingdoms. All of them are just waiting for an opportunity to spirit the two away and then start a rebellion in their names, said Tywine. I will not harm them, declared Ned. The decision is ultimately up to you. You may not want to kill them, but you can't just ignore them forever. Just remember that they will always be your son's greatest threat, replied Tywine. Is there something you wanted? Asked Ned. My son is rotting in a cell. I would see him released not just from your custody but from your service as well. Give him a pardon and release him from his oath as a member of the King's Guard, said Tywine. Your son stabbed a man in the back. A man he swore to protect, protested Ned. A man who murdered your father and brother. If anything, you should be congratulating my son, replied Tywine. Aerys Targaryen was mine to kill. The last thing he should have saw was my sword swinging at his head. Instead your son killed him like a coward, said Ned. Perhaps you should speak to him before judging him. You might find his reasons for what he did weren't so simple, suggested Tywine. What reasons? Frowned Ned. Tywine didn't answer. He just simply turned and walked away. For the next few hours, Tywine's words stuck inside of Ned's mind. Jaime couldn't have had a good reason to do what he did. He just couldn't, and yet the question plagued Ned regardless. He couldn't even concentrate on what his brother and Stannis were talking about right in front of him. Barristan is one of the most honorable men in the Seven Kingdoms. Why wouldn't my brother want him for his Kingsguard? Asked Benjen. The man fights against you, supporting the madman who butchers your father and elder brother. And you want your brother to give him a reward for fighting so bravely against you. Why is it Jaime Lannister is considered a traitor for murdering a monster, and yet when Sir Barristan fights for that monster you would reward the old man? Asked Stannis. He was just on the wrong side. He swore an oath to serve Aerys Targaryen and kept it. He is a man of honor, said Benjen. And that honor was gained by fighting against you. Stannis shook his head. Finally Ned couldn't take it anymore. Pardon me, my lords. I must attend to something, he told them before departing the room. Underscore 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 underscore. Jaime Lannister had been counting the stones and bricks used to construct the room for the past few hours, but always seemed to lose count, so he would start all over again. He repeated the same cycle over and over again, except whenever he was thinking of Cersei and Tyrion. He thought about them a lot, but mostly Cersei. Then he was surprised by a visitor. Jaime had to admit that of all the people he expected to come through that door, Ned Stark was not one of them. The new king of Westeros stepped inside with two of his household guards. Lord Eddard Stark. Oh, forgive me, I meant King Eddard Stark. My apologies, your grace. Spending day after day in this fancy cell seems to have taken a toll on my mind, Jaime mockingly bowed. Leave us, Ned ordered his guards. They gave him a reluctant look but did as they were told and left the room. Such loyal creatures, thought Jaime. Your father requested a pardon on your behalf. No doubt my father wants me back to once again be his heir instead of my younger brother. Tywine Lannister may be the smartest man in the Seven Kingdoms except when it comes to me and Tyrion. If my father was truly smart, he would give Casterly Rock to Tyrion. He was always the smart one among us, commented Jaime. Why did you do it? The king demanded. Why did I do what? You'll have to be more specific, your grace. I've done a lot of things, Jaime shrugged. Why did you stab Aerys Targaryen? Demanded Ned. To kill him, of course, Jaime replied. Why? Why kill him at all? You were a member of his Kingsguard sworn to protect him, so what made you break your oath? Ned snapped. Does it matter? Kingslayer, I hear they call me now. Personally, I prefer Dragonslayer myself. Has a better ring to it, smirked Jaime. Ned suddenly launched forward, grabbing Jaime and slamming him against the wall. Answer me, damn you! Ned yelled. The old man certainly had some strength in him. You could have just said, please, your grace. If you really want to know the truth, then here it is. I've endured many unpleasant things from your predecessor. I remember standing outside his room when he violently raped his own wife, the Queen. Sir Gerald Hightower always told me my job was to protect the king, not judge him. And I kept my vows. Even when he murdered your father and brother. Even when he ordered me to kill my father. But the final straw came when he ordered his pyromancers to set King's Landing ablaze, whispered Jaime. That last sentence seemed to catch Ned Stark completely off guard. Let Robert be king over charred bones and cooked meat. Let him be king of ashes. Those were the last words those pyromancers heard before they left the throne room, and I killed them. I then entered the throne room and stabbed Daeus in the back. If I hadn't, he would have sent someone else to set the city on fire, continued Jaime. Ned finally let go of him. Isn't it funny? Of all the terrible things I've done, the one good thing I'll always be remembered for is the thing they will vilify me the most for, chuckled Jaime. You find this all funny, scoffed Ned. Yes, I do, your grace. The whole system of honor, vows, it's all bullshit. The greatest knights who ever lived, like Arthur Dane, Gerald Hightower, Barristan Selmy, and even I, were nothing more than a madman's thugs. How can one be honorable and indulge Aes Targaryen's insanity? You can't. In the end you'll break one vow or another. Protect the king, obey the king, honor your father, defend the innocent. It's all a big joke and I actually fell for it, laughed Jaime. Ned left the room in disgust. Jaime found himself still laughing even when he was alone. It's all bullshit, he laughed. Underscore 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 underscore. Ned didn't go back to the banquet. He sat in his room thinking for what had to be hours. Jaime's words were still fresh in his mind along with the laughter. But it wasn't laughter of insanity but rather one of irony. Jaime recognized what he was when he was a Kingsguard for Aes Targaryen. Nothing more than a simple thug. Tywin, Stannis, and Jaime all questioned Ned's notion of honor, and for the first time Ned was starting to reconsider it himself. What good did honor do for his father when Ricard obeyed Aes' summons and was killed for it? The Starks, Arryns, Baratheons, and Tullys broke their own oaths of fealty to the Targaryens during the rebellion and are now labeled as heroes. And yet Jaime is chided for breaking his own oath when he stopped a madman from committing genocide. What is the universal definition of honor? If there was one, the gods certainly haven't revealed it yet. He went for a walk throughout the Red Keep, hoping to gather his thoughts. 5 escorts followed him as he passed through the throne room, the Hand's Tower, the Whiterstone Tower, courtyards, stables, even the battlements on the walls. Eventually he came to a stop at the nursery where Jon and Daenerys were being attended by maids. He stood in between both of their cradles. The 2 quiet infants stared at him. Look at you two, life is so simple for you both. You don't care about scheming, plotting, betrayal, wars, not a care in the world. I wish the 2 of you could appreciate that, because life won't be simple for you when you're older. If I had my way I would shield you both from the outside world and what it does to good people. But you are Starks now. Though you might not have my name, I will raise you both as if you were, and I won't lie to either of you or hide you away from the truth. I will just try to prepare you both for living in this life, and the rest is up to the both of you, Ned told them. His speech seemed to lull them both to sleep. Ned smiled and left. Later on, the banquet had ended and everyone had dispersed either to their rooms or left the castle. Ned was on his way back to his room when he heard crying. He followed the sound to Rhaenys's room. Ned knocked on the door and Elia opened the door. Your Grace, she said, quite surprised to see him. Is everything all right? Ned asked. Everything's fine. My little Rhaenys just had a nightmare, that's all, answered Elia. Your brother Oberyn told me earlier about that. I'm sure he told you about his solution, stated Ned. Elia sighed. Yes, he told me. I told him not to ask, but there's no stopping my brother. I'm sorry, but you know I can't just send her away, said Ned. I understand the risk my children are to you and your son. But please consider letting me take them home to Dawn someday, if only for a visit, pleaded Elia. I will think about it. I can't promise any more than that. If there's anything else I can do for you and your children, please let me know, said Ned. Actually you can. In my daughter's nightmares, the mountain is always trying to kill us. She's so afraid of the dreams that she doesn't even want to sleep anymore. But I think you can help her. She watched you defeat the mountain and save us. Please stay with her if only until she can sleep, requested Elia. Ned responded with a nod and stepped inside. Rhaenys was cuddled up on her bed in tears. The poor child was shaking like a leaf. Ned pulled a chair and sat down next to her bed. Your mother tells me you can't sleep, little princess, he whispered. The bad man will come. Any time I sleep he comes, shivered Rhaenys. You're safe now. The bad man is gone, replied Ned. But what if he comes back, asked Rhaenys. I'll stop him just like I did before. Go to sleep, promised Ned. The words seemed to calm her down, at least enough to finally close her eyes. Occasionally she would open them as if to check to see if Ned was still there. Ned stayed for what seemed like hours until finally her eyes stayed close. King Eddard Stark's eyes opened as the morning sun shined through the balcony and into the bedroom. Beside him Catelyn slept peacefully, even as the sounds of King's Landing could be heard inside Maegor's Holdfast. He slowly and quietly got up and changed out of his robes into comfortable dark brown tunic. Ned never really liked wearing outlandish clothing, but rather just something comfortable. Today was his first day holding court and Ned wanted it to go as smoothly as possible. This session would set the tone of his reign to the rest of the Seven Kingdoms, and he needed to make a good impression. He needed to show all the High Lords that he was a man to be respected but also to fear as well. A good ruler needed both to have the loyalty of his subjects. The Starks had always ruled the North with justice and fairness. But when uprisings took place they struck swiftly and brutally to ensure it never happens again. When the Boltons rose up twice, they were put down with bloodshed and stripped them of some of their lands in punishment. The Greystocks weren't so lucky. They were simply wiped out. Ned had no intention of doing something like that. After he finished getting dressed, he silently moved to the door. He opened it to find Sir Roderick and Hollis standing guard outside. Today would also be their last time of being his personal guard, as his first order of business in court was to appoint new Kingsguard. Other than Sir Barristan and Jaime Lannister, all of the White Cloaks were dead. Good morning, Your Grace, the two of them spoke, bowing their heads. Good morning. My wife had a long night and I would like her to sleep a little longer, replied Ned. If it please you, Your Grace, I will remain here, nodded Hollis. Roderick escorted Ned as he did his morning routine of walking the entire castle at least once when he gets up. He checks on everything from the kitchens, the stables, the Hands Tower, the White Stone Tower, the courtyards, the September, and he would finish in the Godswood to pray. He had greeted those he passed by, from retainers at court to simple stable boys. Ned tried to learn and remember each of their names. They were all people just like him and he tried to treat them as such. When he had finished his routine, he headed towards the small council chamber where Jon Arryn was seated at the table going over hundreds of documents. Reading material? Ned asked. Records of all previous small council meetings for the past 20 years. Say what you want about the Targaryens, but they certainly did a good job of documenting everything they did, answered Jon. You're not actually going to read all of those, are you? Asked Ned as he took a seat. Of course not. That's what squires are for, chuckled Jon. The two laughed. I have a few ideas on who to fill the chairs in here, but ultimately the decision is yours. We've got a lot of work to do, so I suggest you fill the possessions carefully but quickly as well. I have too few candidates in mind, spoke Ned. Care to share them? Requested Jon. Stannis Baratheon will be master of ships. He's no friend, but he is always honest and I will always know where I stand with him. Hoster Tully will be master of laws. I know he'll do anything in his power to keep Robb and Cat safe, answered Ned. Good choices. All of them fought with us, so we don't have to question their loyalty. Grand Maester Pycelle will maintain his position, but that still leaves the more delicate positions of Whispers and Coin. Perhaps appointing one of the Tyrells for Whisperer to help ensure their loyalty and a Lannister for Coin. Gods know that family knows a thing or two about money, pointed out Jon. Tywin Lannister will never accept anything less than Hand of the King, and Mace Tyrell is no accountant. Every great accomplishment that he claims belongs to someone else. When Robert and Stannis were defeated at the Battle of Ashford, it was Randall Tarly who defeated them. Now there's a man I wouldn't mind having on the small council. Unfortunately, he'll never accept either Whisperer or Coin. Lord Tarly is a soldier, not a spy or accountant, sighed Ned. Perhaps Kevan Lannister for coin. Tywin will want someone he can control on the small council, and his younger brother is held in high regard in the Westernlands. And perhaps Lord Mathis Rowan for whisperers. He's one of Mace Tyrell's vassals and he is well loved in the Reach. Pick the two of them and you gain the Lannisters and Tyrell's approval, said Jon. And lose the Martells' support as well. Putting a Lannister and Tyrell bannerman on the council and not one of them will infuriate Doran, grunted Ned. The difference is that we don't have to worry about them rebelling. You have Rhaenys and Aegon, replied Jon. I don't like the idea of using children as hostages, sighed Ned. At least they're alive, which is more than what anyone else would have done, said Jon. Before Ned could respond, Jon pulled out a letter that was hidden inside a large stack of papers. What's this? Jon asked out loud. Ned looked over the man's shoulder as he opened it and examined the inside. I think you might want to take a look at this, Jon said as he handed over the letter. Ned quickly skimmed through the paper. Sir Roderick, he called out. The loyal knight entered the room. Bring me Grand Maester Pycelle, Ned ordered. Roderick bowed his head and left. It didn't take long before the Grand Maester was brought before the king and instantly bowed his head as he moved slowly into the room. Your Grace. I understand you wish to see me, he said. Please have a seat. Ned pulled up a chair for him to sit. Pycelle complied and sat down. How long have you sat on the small council? Asked Ned. I have served the crown faithfully for nearly 40 years, Your Grace, and I would happily continue that in your service, answered Pycelle. During the last small council meeting, every one of Aerys Targaryen's councillors advised him not to open the city gates to Tywin Lannister and his army. Everyone except you, stated Jon. Pycelle cringed slightly, but the old man managed to quickly regain his composure. I admit now in hindsight that it was terrible advice, but I had no idea of Tywin's treachery. He didn't even bother to lie. The old man probably knew that wouldn't have done him any good. Tywin Lannister was Hand of the King for nearly 20 years. You'd have me believe that you had no idea what kind of a man you had been working for after all that time, frowned Ned. Now the old man was starting to panic. No. Never, exclaimed Pycelle. You never liked the Mad King. Very few did towards the end of his life, but Tywin always had your loyalty even after he stepped down from being the Hand, accused Jon. No, my lords, I mean my lord and your Grace, Pycelle quickly corrected himself. Even though the others advised Aerys to let the army fortify the outside with members of the city guard for support, you insisted to let Tywin's army inside and put everyone's lives in his hands, said Ned. No, your Grace. After the death of the prince at the Trident, your army was on its way to the city. The Tyrell army was still bogged down besieging Storm's End, and the Martells could not send us support in time to stop you, your Grace. So when Lord Tywin had arrived, I knew it was Aerys Targaryen's last hope, protested Pycelle. Did you tell all of this to Merrill? Asked Jon. Pycelle went pale. Who? The whore who has been warming your bed, shouted Ned. Pycelle nearly jumped out of his seat. A maester takes many vows, including celibacy and loyalty to whomever is the king, whether they are popular or not. You have broken both of those vows, and I will not have a man who breaks his word so callously, such as you, sit on my council. Wait, please, your Grace. Pleaded Pycelle, who fell to his knees. I will do anything you ask of me. Guards, shouted Ned. Roderick and Horlis rushed inside. Get this man out of my castle, he ordered. The two seemed to smile as they grabbed the pleading maester and dragged him out of the room. Ned could still hear Pycelle screaming down the hall. Well, it seems like we have yet another opening, mumbled Jon. Ned next commanded that Lord Varys be brought before him. The eunuch strolled in very calmly. And why shouldn't he? He was a man of great power. The fact that Grand Maester Pycelle was banished from the Red Keep was proof of that. Your Grace, bowed Varys. How did you get this letter past your guards and into this room? Demanded Ned, holding up the piece of paper containing the damning evidence on Pycelle. Varys smiled. My little birds do more than whisper in my ear. They also send my own whispers to others when I need it. Why then? Why reveal the Grand Maester's treachery at all? Asked Jon. To prove to you both that I am good at my work, answered Varys. And what do you want for giving this information? A pardon. Your old position on the council, asked Jon. All would be preferable, I admit. Pledging my loyalty would have done me little good to a man like you, your Grace. I make no offense, but trust does not come easy for you. Proving that I am reliable would gain your attention better than making a vow of loyalty you would not believe, replied Varys. Why, I want someone in my service who loyally served Aerys Targaryen, asked Ned. A question I would ask you. You wish to ask Sir Barristan if he will serve you as Lord Commander of the Kingsguard, responded Varys. Ned didn't bother asking how he knew that. His honor has never been in question, but yours is, he stated. I confess that is largely my own doing. I prefer to be a mystery to everyone else. It allows me to do my job so much easier, confessed Varys. It also doesn't help you gain my trust, said Ned. I would value your trust, your grace. I know it would not come overnight, but I hope in time you seek my counsel in times of need. Aerys Targaryen was a madman and a fool. I served him faithfully not for his own sake but for the sake of his son Rhaegar. I had pinned my hopes on the crown prince to do what was best for the realm. But that hope died after he took your sister and later had his skull crushed on the trident. The realm has always been my priority, and while I do not know if you are the right man to be king, I will try and do whatever I can to help you maintain order for the Seven Kingdoms, explained Varys. Ned couldn't tell if the man was lying or not. Varys was a very hard man to read, which probably helped him gain his former position. Ned believed that the eunuch may have been honest in some of the things he said, but wasn't sure which parts were. But for some reason he did believe Varys' vow of doing whatever was best for the realm, and he was the best man for the job. Underscore 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 underscore. Ned stood outside the throne room dressed in his royal attire and his crown on top of his head. Court was about to begin, and he taking a moment to calm himself before he entered. Jon Arryn was already inside, taking his seat at the left of the Iron Throne. Catelyn stood next to him, completely calm. Take a deep breath, she told him. Ned was still uncertain if he was the right man for this, but he was absolutely certain that Catelyn was born to be a queen. Gods, what have I gotten myself, he moaned. You will do fine. Just imagine your father, Brandon, and Lyanna all standing in there gleaming with pride of you, Catelyn said. The words actually made Ned smile. Here we go, whispered Ned as the two entered the throne room. Every great lord in Westeros and hundreds of others stood up from their seats. Golden direwolf banners hung from the ceilings and walls, replacing the dragon skulls that decorated the room. All hail his grace Eddard of House Stark, the first of his name, King of the Andals and the First Men, Lord of the Seven Kingdoms, and Protector of the Realm, announced the royal steward. Catelyn sat down on a chair next to the throne, and then Ned sat down on the Iron Throne for the first time. The large metallic monstrosity had been intimidating from the moment he first laid eyes on it. It was the most coveted prize in Westeros because of what it represented. Power without equal. Jaime Lannister had lied about it though. It wasn't comfortable, and Ned had to be careful or he would cut himself on one of the many blades that made up the chair. Be seated, called out Ned. Everyone sat down. Ned had already spoken with the men he wanted on his council, and all of them agreed to his offers. Now it was merely a formality to publicly announce their new titles. A good king surrounds himself with even greater men. I have thought long and hard on whom should sit on the small council, and I have made my decision. Jon Arryn of the Vale, as you all know, shall serve as Hand of the King. Lord Hoster Tully of Riverrun shall serve as Master of Law. Lord Stannis Baratheon of Storm's End shall serve as Master of Ships. Sir Kevan Lannister of Casterly Rock shall serve as Master of Coin. And Lord Varys shall maintain his position as Master of Whispers, he announced. Everyone reacted differently. The Riverlords, Lords of the Vale, Storm Lords, and Western Lords all seemed satisfied, while the Lords of the Reach and the Dornish were almost infuriated. But after a conversation with Varys and some thinking, Ned already had a plan to calm all of them. For those of you who don't already know, Grand Maester Pycelle had been barred from my presence. Though the conclave decides who the Grand Maester is, I will not have him sit on the small council. Therefore I need a new Maester to replace him, and I understand that Maester Gorman Tyrell is considered to be a pious and honorable man, said Ned. Mace's eyes seemed to light up. The Lord of Highgarden and all of his bannermen knew exactly what was going on. I would personally request that he replace Pycelle on the small council. However, if the conclave should dictate another should serve as Grand Maester, I will defer to their judgment, declared Ned. Of course the Tyrells would make sure the conclave would vote Gorman in. According to Varys, the Tyrells had quite the influence over the order. Now that has been settled, Sir Barristan Selmy, please step forward, said Ned. The old knight stepped forward clad in his Kingsguard armor. He was missing his sword from its sheath. You have served Aes Targaryen with honor and dignity. My friend Robert Baratheon respected you so much that he instructed his maester to tend to your wounds before his own. An act that cost my brother his life, stated Stannis. Almost everyone in the room was shocked that he would blatantly speak out while the king was talking. Lord Stannis speaks the truth. You are alive today because of Robert's mercy, and his mercy cost him his own life, agreed Ned. I would have gladly trade places with him, your grace, spoke Barristan. I believe, and though you cannot bring Robert back from the dead, perhaps you can make sure that his death had meaning. Will you swear to serve me as you did Aes Targaryen? Will you protect me and my family as the cost of your own life if needed? Asked Ned. I will, your grace. Let me be your sword and shield as I was to Targaryens, replied Barristan. Then I pardon you of all past crimes committed in the Mad King's name and name you Lord Commander of the Kingsguard, said Ned. He motioned for a guard to bring forth Barristan's sword and took it into his hand. Barristan knelt down on one knee before Ned touched the man's sword on both his shoulders. Rise now and assume your duty, commanded Ned. Barristan stood up and the king handed the sword over to him. The knight sheathed his sword and took his place beside Catelyn. I realize this doesn't bring back your brother Lord Stannis, but Sir Barristan will spend the rest of his life in service to the realm, said Ned. As long as he carries out his duties and fulfills his vows, then that is enough for me, stated Stannis. The man seemed to have a look of approval on his face, though it was hard to tell. Now bring forth Sir Jaime Lannister, commanded Ned. The Kingslayer walked into the room escorted by 4 knights. Ned doubted they could actually stop him if the man wanted to escape, but he was not going to be left unattended. You are charged with the murder of Aes Targaryen and breaking your oath in protecting him. Do you deny these charges? No, I killed him right where I'm standing now, stated Jaime. He was not bragging about it, but he certainly wasn't ashamed of it. Ned noticed Tywin's eyes narrowing. The Lord of Casterly Rock was watching this all very carefully. Then you are found guilty and are to be sentenced immediately. I hereby strip you of your rank and title within the Kingsguard and banish you from my service. Where you go and whom you associate yourself with is of no concern to me, said Ned. The entire room was shocked, but none more so than Jaime. All except Tywin and Kevan, who passed on Ned's message to the elder Lannister earlier. You're letting me go? Why? Asked Jaime. I did not give you leave to question me, now go, commanded Ned. Jaime glanced at his father and upon seeing him seemed to change. As if realizing what had just happened. Without another word Jaime walked over to his father and uncle. Sir Brynden Tully, come forward, said Ned. The Blackfish of House Tully stepped out from within the crowd. You have expressed to me your wish to join the Kingsguard and I would see it done. Underscore 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 underscore. It took hours before Ned could end his first court and leave the room. Brynden Tully was named to the Kingsguard, and then Ned listened to various petitions and requests that were mostly land disputes. After settling them all, Ned dismissed the court and requested to speak with Doran, Elia, and Oberyn Martell in the small council chamber. He sat in the king's chair with Sir Barristan at his side waiting for the Martells to arrive. Ned knew they wouldn't be happy, but he had something that would change that. Lord Doran and his siblings arrived and they looked as angry as expected. Elia hid her anger better than the others, but it was there all the same. Your Grace. You wished to speak with us, Doran spoke in a guarded tone. I did, nodded Ned. And what might that be? Are you going to throw us a bone now that you've given every highborn family a member on your council? Save us, spat Oberyn. Oberyn, snapped Elia, silencing him. I requested to see you because I seek your permission. Lord Doran, when your niece Rhaenys and my son Robb come of age, I would see them joined in marriage, stated Ned. The mood of the room changed instantly. Doran, Oberyn, and especially Elia were absolutely speechless. Everyone around me keeps telling me that Rhaenys and Aegon are the biggest threats to my reign. There is only one way to handle this, and that is to make them my family. Rhaenys will marry Robb, and should I conceive a daughter I would seek your permission in marrying her to Aegon. I stuttered Doran, who turned to Elia as if handing the decision over to her. Yes. I consent, spoke Elia. She was still stunned, but now she seemed relieved, as if a huge weight has been lifted away. Her children were now safe, and not only that, they would become royalty once more. It seems I owe you once again, said Oberyn. You owe nothing, replied Ned. But I do, and I swear one day I will repay it, said Oberyn. 7 years later. He wasn't sure how he got to the throne room, but he knew he wasn't alone. One by one they emerged from the shadows. A golden lion roared near the steps of the Iron Throne. A vine grew at an exponential rate and blossomed into a golden flower at the base of the steps. A blue falcon soared through the air and landed on the steps. A golden kraken used its massive tentacles to pull itself towards the steps. A grey direwolf howled on the step. A black stag galloped to join the others. Then a new presence moved around the Iron Throne and climbed on top of it, emerging into the light. A golden direwolf sat down on the throne, a crown resting on top of its head. Then fire broke through the floor, bathing every animal in flames. They screeched in pain moments before they turned to ash. And yet he was still standing in the throne room unharmed. A hideous screech followed the carnage. Aegon Targaryen's eyes snapped open, and he realized he had been dreaming again. It was always the same dream every night or so, and no matter how much dream wine he takes, still it plagues him whenever he shuts his eyes. After stretching his legs and getting dressed, he made his way out into the courtyard to find Robb and Jon. Along the way he noticed the usual stares and looks he had received since as long as he could remember. His mother told him it was because he was a Targaryen, a family name scorned by the Seven Kingdoms. Because of what Aerys and his father Rhaegar did, their entire family was considered tainted. Most people avoided him while others didn't hide their disgust. There were only a few people that were good to him. King Eddard Stark had treated him with nothing but kindness. Robb Stark, crowned prince to the Iron Throne, Jon Snow, and Dany were probably the only people Aegon really considered to be his friends. Robb and Jon would always bring Aegon into some schemes which had gotten them all into trouble more than once. Dany was an avid reader and could spend hours in the royal library. Aegon bonded with his aunt over the fact that they were outsiders. Neither of them were well loved in the Red Keep. That was the opposite of Aegon's sister Rhaenys. When Aegon entered the courtyard, he heard the clash of wood. Robb Stark parried another blow from his cousin Jon Snow. Though it was just a simple practice spare, a crowd had already begun to surround the practice circle where the two combatants swung their padded wooden swords. The padding on both of them slowed them down, but it was a small price to pay for ensuring minimal injuries. "Swords straighter," shouted Sir Roderick, the Master of Arms. He had trained Aegon, Robb, and Jon since they were 4 years old. Granted, it wasn't extensive lessons back then, but as time went on and they got better, Roderick's lessons got longer and harder. Robb ducked underneath an incoming blow and swung his sword around. But Jon saw it coming and rushed forward, catching Robb's sword arm and trapping it. Robb wrapped his right leg around Jon's and pushed forward, knocking them both to the ground. They rolled away from each other and got back to their feet. Robb and Jon both rushed at one another, swinging their wooden swords with all their strength. And the two of them quickly regretted it when they both were hit in the chest, and although the padding protected them for the most part, it looked like it hurt a lot. "That's it. Contest over," shouted Roderick. Not that he actually needed to say anything, as Robb and Jon held their chests in pain. Aegon found himself laughing as the audience cheered and dispersed. He met up with the two as they walked off the practice circle and began removing their padding. "I thought this stuff was supposed to protect us," complained Snow as he tossed his padding aside. "It would have if the two of you hadn't been trying to hit each other so hard," laughed Aegon. "Yeah, well, some of us aren't a natural like you," stated Robb. Though Aegon was the same age as the other two, he was the better swordsman. Truthfully, that was all he truly concentrated on, since he didn't stand to inherit anything at first. Then Sansa Stark was born, and King Stark told Aegon that one day he would marry her and become Lord of Dragonstone. "Come on, we don't want to be late for Maester Gorman's lessons," said Robb. He led Jon and Aegon away as they headed back inside the Red Keep. Whatever bows and respective acknowledgements from people they passed by were all directed at Rob. Of all the children being raised by Ned Stark, Rob and Rhaenys were the only two shown any respect. And of course they were. They were going to be king and queen someday. The three made their way into the Maegor's Holdfast and to the royal library where Dany, Rhaenys, and the Sand Snakes were all waiting inside. Maester Gorman had not arrived yet. Oberyn, Nymeria, and Tywin were all bastards of Oberyn Martell, and he brought the three of them to be raised alongside Rhaenys. They were officially Rhaenys' ladies-in-waiting. Unofficially they were guard dogs who didn't let anything happen to their cousin. Though they were about the same age as the others, the Sand Snakes could be as vicious as wild dogs when it came to protecting their family. Oberyn was the eldest and the most aggressive, a warrior at heart. Nymeria was beautiful and elegant but no less dangerous than her older sister. Tywin was a bookworm just like Dany and had a fascination with herbs and poison. Aegon's sister Rhaenys was the eldest in the room. She was courteous and kind in the manner most women were expected to be. She was also one of the few people that could actually order the Sand Snakes to do anything. The three sisters were notoriously stubborn and cared little for titles or ranks. Only their father, King Stark, and Rhaenys could ever get them to do something without complaints or resistance. Rhaenys had one other advantage over everyone else. She had Rob wrapped around her finger. Aegon's mother often joked that Rhaenys used to lead Rob around like a puppy on a leash. Though a little older now, Rob still couldn't refuse anything from his future queen. So the boys are finished trying to be men and decided to finally join us, quipped Oberyn. At least we don't need to practice swordplay in the cellar after dark, mocked Snow. Well, we have to. Otherwise we'd embarrass you children, mocked Nymeria. Name the time and we'll show who the real children are around here, dared Rob. Tonight then, your worship, said Oberyn. The Sand Snakes always mocked Rob by calling him your worship. Tonight then, smiled Rhaenys. Her smile wasn't mocking like the others. Maester Gorman then entered the room and began the lessons. When the children were given a group assignment with a partner, Aegon made sure he was working with Dany. She was the smartest of the students, but there was another reason. Dany. Is it uncommon for people to have the same dream over and over again? Asked Aegon. What do you mean? Replied Dany. I mean, is there a reason for having the same dream again and again? Answered Aegon. What kind of dream? Asked Dany. More like a nightmare. I see animals being burnt alive in the throne room and then I hear some monstrous roar, then I always wake up, explained Aegon. Well, I have read about cases in which our ancestors were blessed with the ability of foresight. And not just those with the blood of the dragon. In the north the Crannog men claim that a few of their people can see the future. As did the Green Seers of the Children of the Forest. Of course that's if you actually believe any of that, said Dany. She didn't really seem to believe it, and quite frankly Aegon didn't blame her. When was the last time anyone saw magic? Not the tricks magicians perform, but real magic. The Maesters claimed that magic was gone. It vanished from the world around the freehold of Valyria was destroyed and the last of the dragons died a few hundred years afterwards. Still none of that eased Aegon's mind and he doubted it would stop the dream from happening again. Underscore 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 underscore. Get back here, shouted Jon Snow as Rob took off laughing from the dining hall. Rob had waited all day to get back at his cousin for dousing him with flour a few days ago and decided to retaliate by setting horse manure on Jon's seat during lunch. And once Snow sat down, Rob busted up laughing. He took off down the halls with Jon in pursuit. He passed by several guards who basically looked the other ways. And why wouldn't they? Rob was their future king and the last thing they wanted was to get involved in one of the children's pranks. Rob, Jon, Aegon, and the Sand Snakes were always trying to pull someone on each other. Rob managed to outrun Jon and hide inside the royal library. Inside, Dany was reading another one of her books at a desk. Then again, that wasn't anything new. She'd probably read the entire library twice over. The prince chuckled though as he heard Jon rushing down the hallway outside. Why do you always hide here? Asked Dany without looking up from her book. I should ask you the same thing, replied Rob. Because aside from you, your father, Jon, Aegon, Rhaenys, and their cousins. No one really likes me, answered Dany. That was the unfortunate consequence of being a Targaryen. After the death of her father, Dany's family had become vilified throughout the kingdoms. Only Rhaenys seemed to be immune to that hate due to her betrothal to Robb. Who cares about anyone else? I'm going to be king, Rhaenys is going to be queen, Aegon's going to be Lord of Dragonstone, and Jon wants to be in the Kingsguard. Oberyn, Nymeria, and Tywin are probably going to help Arya and run Dorne. And we all love you, so you'll be fine, said Robb. Dany gave him a thankful smile. Just then the door slammed open and Jon rushed in. You're dead, he said. Robb took off running towards the other exit with Jon right on his tail. But as soon as he reached the other door, it flung open with the 3 sand snakes on the other side holding buckets of flour. Before the two could react, Robb and Jon were covered in white powder. Dany, Oberyn, Nymeria, and Tywin all busted up laughing while Robb and Jon didn't find it very amusing. I did warn that you hide in here too much, laughed Dany. That was for stuffing our clothes with rotten eggs, smiled Oberyn. What's going on here? Demanded Maester Gorman as he entered the room. All the children knew they were in trouble. Underscore 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 underscore. King Stark was less than pleased when Maester Gorman marched into his study with Ned's eldest son and nephew covered in flour along with Oberyn's daughters and Dany. Ned didn't really need an explanation of what happened, he managed to figure out it on his own. He dismissed Gorman and demanded an explanation. Well, I was messing around with Jon and then those 3 did this to us. Dany had nothing to do with it, said Robb. Yeah, nodded Jon. The sand snakes all nodded as well. They were all terrible liars, but at least they were protective of Daenerys. Ned was thankful how close the Targaryen children were with his own. Dany, you may go, Ned said. The Targaryen princess nodded and turned to leave. She exchanged a look with Robb and Jon, who both gave her a wink. Ned turned his attention to Oberyn's daughters. You 3 as well. I'll let your aunt deal with the lot of you. The sand snakes all groaned as they left. That left only Robb and Jon. I don't mind if you want to have a little fun, but your antics are getting out of hand. The 2 of you will clean up the library, said Ned. But we didn't make that mess. It was the girls, Robb protested. And I'm sure that had nothing to do with their nightgowns smelling like rotten eggs, replied Ned. A unison of groans followed. Go. And something like this had better not happen again, ordered Ned. The 2 boys sighed and left. Ned didn't enjoy shouting at them, but he had no choice. Robb will one day sit on the Iron Throne and Ned couldn't afford to coddle or spoil him the way he wished he could. He needed to prepare his son for the responsibility, and he needed to prepare Jon to help him. The lone wolf dies in winter, but the pack survives. Your Grace. Lord Varys wishes an audience, announced Sir Mandon Moore of the Kingsguard outside the study. Jon Arryn brought him to King's Landing, and while the man was absolutely committed to protecting the Stark family, Ned didn't like his cold and heartless demeanor. Send him in, said Ned. Varys stepped inside, closing the door behind. What can I do for you, Lord Varys? Asked Ned. You can listen, Your Grace. I have just received word from my little birds on Pike. Balon Greyjoy had commissioned more longships to be constructed, his blacksmiths are working day and night crafting swords and shields, and his bannermen are assembling, said Varys. Send a raven to Pike and demand that he state his intentions, replied Ned. Your Grace, I have come to see you as intelligent man, so please take no offense when I say that I believe you already know his intent, responded Varys. He was right about one thing. Ned did know what Balon Greyjoy intended to do. If Ned Stark could gain a crown, then the Lord of Pike assumes he probably could as well. And without Pike's submission to the Iron Throne, the Ironborn will reave and pillage once more. Send ravens to Casterly Rock, Riverrun, Highgarden, and Winterfell. Have their bannermen reinforce their coastlines, said Ned. Later that night, the children all one by one snuck out of their apartments and made their way down into the cellars. Robb was the last one to arrive and apparently was going to be the first person to fight, because the moment he showed up, Jon and Aegon handed him a wooden sword and padding. So who's my first victim? Asked Robb as he put on the padding. If by victim you mean the person who's going to kick your ass, then that would your future queen, smiled Oberyn. Robb was quite surprised when Rhaenys stepped forward in padding and holding a wooden sword. Hey, wait a minute, he protested. What's the matter? Afraid of a girl, mocked Tywin. More like spousal abuse, laughed Nymeria. I'll go easy on you, smiled Rhaenys. Don't let her talk to you like that. Dany cheered Robb on. She's not as tough as she looks. She's all dresses and no skills, said Jon. Aegon threw him a look. What? Shrugged Jon. My sister and cousins are never going to let you live that one down, mumbled Aegon. It wasn't that Robb didn't think Rhaenys could fight him, it's just that he didn't want to hurt her. As far back as he could remember, Robb always found himself fascinated by her. Elia Martell and Robb's own father seemed to even encourage two participants circled each other with their weapons lowered. How about we make a deal? If I win, I get to take on Oberyn and later on take you to lunch on top of the Red Keep's bell tower, offered Robb. And if I win? Asked Rhaenys. If you win, I still take you to lunch on the bell tower. You just get bragging rights. But that's a big if, smirked Robb. Enough flirting, you two. This is a sparring room, not a brothel, called out Oberyn. Here's my counteroffer, said Rhaenys. She suddenly lunged forward and almost caught Robb by surprise. He deflected the blow and the two assumed defensive stances. I smack you around a bit and after you lose you get me a horse from a farm just outside the city. A beautiful red Dornish stallion I purchased, she continued. Why not just pick it up yourself? Robb asked. Rhaenys used the distraction to deliver a quick jab to Robb's right ribs. It didn't hurt, but Robb was starting to realize her strategy. Distract him with words and then strike. Because I didn't exactly ask permission from my mother to buy it. So it would be better if you would pick it up and bring it to me as a gift, explained Rhaenys. Robb swung his sword, but Rhaenys deflected it and tried to knee him in the chest. Robb caught her and trapped her arms. The two's faces were mere inches apart. Ask me nicely, smiled Robb. Oh gods, moaned Aegon. The last thing he wanted to see was his sister about to make out with someone. Rhaenys wrapped her leg around Robb's and then spun, lifting Robb off his feet into a hip toss and slammed him on the ground. Robb groaned when he hit the floor and Rhaenys mounted on top of him. Rhaenys smiled as she leaned down and whispered into his ear, please. Underscore 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 underscore. The next morning Robb's back still felt like it was on fire. Rhaenys won that round, but he was going to make sure to pay her back next time. Not because he was mad at her, he just wanted to impress her. Jon and Aegon often teased him that Rhaenys casted a love spell on him. Not that there was anything wrong with that. The two of them will get married when Robb comes of age at 13. But that was still far off and he had more pressing concerns at the moment, like retrieving Rhaenys's horse. Robb convinced Sir Aris Oakurt of the Kingsguard to escort him outside the city to retrieve the animal. Of all the members of Father's Kingsguard, Robb liked Aris the most. He was the one knight who always seemed to let the prince get away with his little schemes or pranks. The journey was short as the farm was within sight of the city. That was probably the only reason Aris agreed to allow Robb to travel with only a one-man escort. The breeder tried to haggle the price until Sir Aris pointed out that he was arguing with the future king. He didn't argue much after that. I don't remember you ever being so interested in a particular horse, my prince, Aris stated on their way back with the horse in tow. It's not for me, replied Robb. Oh, said Aris as if he seemed to figure it out. He had a smirk on his face that annoyed Robb. Was he mocking him? What? Demanded Robb. Oh, nothing, smiled Aris. I just find it funny how much Lady Rhaenys seems to have you wrapped around her thumb. She does not, protested Robb. I'm not mocking you, my prince. I was just. Aris explained. Something caught his attention and he drew his sword. Robb turned his head to see a man in rags approaching them. Aris directed his horse around Robb, positioning himself between the stranger and the prince. That's far enough, snapped Aris. The stranger didn't seem dangerous, but that didn't seem to matter to Sir Aris. He was old and unkempt, his clothing dirty and torn like someone out of Flea's bottom. "My prince. Please, my children are hungry and need food. If you could but spare a few coins," pleaded the man. Rob could have reached into his pocket and tossed him a few coppers. But how quickly would the man spend them and need more? He couldn't exactly ask Rob for more. Ned had always made sure enough food was shipped into the city but refrained from just giving out free money. He always said if the people rely on you too much then they can't stand on their own. And the truth was the crown would go bankrupt trying to give everyone money because people would want to be given more and probably riot when they wouldn't get what they want. Besides, Rob was planning on buying some flowers on their way back to the Red Keep and he only took enough money to a single set. When the man took another step, Oris swung his sword. The blade missed the old man but it was intentional. The knight was trying to scare him off rather than kill him. Clearly it worked as the beggar took off running. "We need to leave, my prince," said Oris once the man was out of sight. "Actually, could we make a quick stop at the Street of Flowers?" asked Rob. Oris' smirk returned. Underscore 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 underscore. Rhaenys and her cousins all stood waiting in the courtyard. Rob promised to have the horse back by midday and the sun was now directly overhead. "He's late," said Oberyn. "So," shrugged Rhaenys. Oberyn, Tywin, and Nymeria always gave Rob grief whenever they could. It wasn't that they hated him, they just wanted to get as much shots in while they could. One day Rob was going to sit on the Iron Throne and on that day, everything they said to him from then on would be guarded. "You don't insult the king in public." Rhaenys often was a little uncomfortable with how much attention Rob gave her. She did find the boy to be sweet and was quite fond of him, but she was always afraid she might take advantage of him. Rob's father saved her life when she was little and the last thing she wanted to do was repay his kindness with treachery on her part. "A good man is punctual," said Nymeria. "Uncle Oberyn is a good man and he never shows up on time," laughed Rhaenys. "The difference is Uncle Oberyn isn't a brainless royal brat," said Tywin. "He's not a brat," protested Rhaenys. "You're right. There are a few other words that can describe him better," replied Tywin. Their conversation was interrupted as Rob entered the courtyard on horseback with Sir Oris Oakurt as an escort and bringing a saddled red mare behind them. It had violet and golden flowers on its mane, a sweet touch Rob probably added. "Show off," muttered Oberyn. Rhaenys stepped forward to greet the prince and his gift. "The flowers are a nice touch," she smiled as she petted the back of the animal's neck. "Do you like it?" asked Rob. "She's beautiful," replied Rhaenys. She pulled herself up and mounted on the saddle. "Let's see how fast she is." Rhaenys smirked at Rob. She kicked the stirrups and her horse bolted out of the courtyard with Rob chasing after her. Underscore 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 underscore. In the Martell family, the youngest was the wild one. Elia's brother Oberyn was always off making trouble or getting in bed with someone he met an hour earlier. Elia was the smart one and always composed herself in front of others. And yet that seemed to be the opposite of her children. Her son Aegon was the noble and composed one while Rhaenys was the wild and feisty one. Though both of her children were the smart ones. Elia had just come from King Stark's office where he informed her of Rhaenys and Rob giving the City Watch and Kingsguard a chase all over King's Landing. She was going to make sure to give her daughter a very long talk about this. Though Elia had to admit she had to suppress a smirk when the king told her everything. She was glad that Rhaenys was so close to Rob. That was something Elia never had with Rhaegar. When she got back to her apartment, she found Aegon on the balcony looking down at the city below. For the past few days he had been unusually quiet. He seemed concerned about something but Elia could never really get him to open up about it. "Something on your mind?" she asked as joined him. "When are you going to stop asking that?" groaned Aegon. "When you actually give me an answer," replied Elia. "It's no big deal," sighed Aegon. He never was a good liar but he was incredibly stubborn. Getting him to open up was always a challenge. "It does to you." "I've never seen you like this," said Elia. "It's just a stupid dream." "Nothing more," replied Egon. Clearly it wasn't, but Elia decided it wasn't worth trying to get him to open up. All she could do was just wait until her son felt he could share it with her. "How are you lessons?" asked Elia, changing the topic. "Maester Gorman says I'm doing well. He even said it might be time for me to visit Dragonstone," answered Egon. Elia's stomach twisted inside. One day her son would leave King's Landing with his betrothed Princess Sansa to assume lordship over the ancient Targaryen seat and their vassals. Elia knew it would happen one day, but that didn't mean she had to like it. Dragonstone was a harsh place and offered little real power. Though it was one of the strongest castles in Westeros, it only held dominion over a few islands in Blackwater Bay. At most the Lord of Dragonstone could summon a few thousand men at arms and virtually no cavalry. And Elia would be separated from her only son. With Rhaenys readying herself to becoming queen one day, Elia needed to give her daughter as much support as possible, and that meant staying in King's Landing. "It won't happen until Sansa comes of age, and that's years away," said Elia. "Maybe we could visit it. Go early with Rhaenys and even Robb, Jon, and all the others," said Egon. Elia didn't like where this was going, and she also didn't understand why her son suddenly wanted to visit Dragonstone so much. He always seemed so happy in the Red Keep. "Is something wrong?" she asked. "I just feel like something bad is going to happen. I don't know that is, and I can't explain why I feel this way, but I just know something is going to happen and we don't want to be here when it does," said Egon. Underscore 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 underscore. "So how was your lunch with Rhaenys?" Jon asked Robb. The Crown Prince tried not to blush at the memory, especially in front of his cousin. He just got back from the Bell Tower where he had a private lunch with Rhaenys Targaryen. It wasn't like their lunch was romantic, they just ate together and enjoyed the view. "It was fine," Robb gave his answer, though not to Jon's satisfaction. "Fine," frowned Jon. "You call eating privately with a girl who has you broken like a trained puppy all right? You get excited just when she looks at you." Robb couldn't help it though. He enjoyed her eyes, her smile, her witty remarks. He was completely captivated by her. "Come on, we don't want to miss court," said Robb. They made their way through the Red Keep into the throne room where Father was sitting on the Iron Throne passing judgment on whatever matters were brought before him. Most of it was boring. Laws and land disputes, so dull that Robb actually fell asleep more than once watching it. But sometimes interesting things happened, like when Father passed judgment on criminals. Most were flogged, imprisoned, or sent to the Night's Watch. And sometimes, on rare occasions, Father would take Robb, Jon, and Egon to the executions. There was no King's Justice anymore, the last person holding the title was dismissed years ago. Father would do the act himself, drawing ice and severe a man's head with a single clean swipe. A man who passes the sentence should swing the sword. Robb recognized the occasional face in the room. Lord Commander Barristan Selmy of the King's Guard stood vigil next to the Iron Throne. Sir Brynden Tully, Robb's great-uncle, stood on the other side of the throne. Mother wasn't usually around for official court sessions nowadays, as she had to take care of Sansa and Arya. Lord Stannis Baratheon stood in the corner watching the whole events with the same stern-rigged demeanor he always carried. Sir Kevan Lannister was seated a few feet from the throne, taking notes of the proceedings. Varys stood behind the throne, observing silently with his two keen eyes. Robb was always unnerved by the man's constant smiles. It was hard to tell when they were genuine and when they were simply a mask. Hoster Tully, Robb's grandfather, stood in front of the throne presenting the next case. "Your Grace, I present to you Hubert from Flea's Bottom," announced Hoster. A man in chains was brought inside the throne room by two gold cloaks who forced him to his knees in the middle of the room. "This man has committed murder during an act of robbery. His victim a baker and father of two children. He was apprehended while attempting to escape the scene of his crime and has since confessed," continued Hoster. "Please, Your Grace, I was hungry. My family was starving and we have no money," pleaded Hubert. His voice sounded familiar, and it wasn't until the man lifted up his head up to look Father in the eyes that Robb recognized him. It was the beggar he met on the way back from obtaining Rhaenys' horse. Robb was too speechless to say anything, too much in shock to believe it at first. "Fathers," I met the beggar's gaze with a cold stare. "I will show you more mercy than what you showed your victim. Death or the Night's Watch." "I will give you the night to consider your choice," said father. He motioned for the guards to take him away. Hours passed by and still Robb couldn't get the Hubert's face out of his head. What if he had given the man some money? Then he would have bought food instead of trying to steal for it, and he wouldn't have killed anyone. Robb was so fixated on impressing Rhaenys that he barely even considered a desperate man's plight. The more he thought about it, the worse he felt, and the more he felt responsible for it. Now 2 children were going to grow up without a father. Robb couldn't imagine growing up without his own father. Was the model paragon of a great ruler, striving for justice and order. Robb wanted to be just like him when he grew up, but now he knew he didn't live up to that expectation. Father would have given the man some money, but he didn't. He wasn't anything like his father, and now someone died because of it. Underscore 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 underscore. Ned first noticed something was wrong with Robb during dinner. Catelyn was focused on helping Arya eat, and Sansa cleaned her plate off slowly and ladylike, quickly adjusting to the manners that was expected of her. The only person who seemed out of place was Robb. Usually he would scarf down whatever they were having and quickly get back to something that involved Jon or Aegon. But he hadn't touched his plate at all. He just stared at it like he was in a trance. "Robb, are you not hungry?" Ned asked. Robb barely acknowledged him. He just stood up and walked away. Robb called out, "Ned." Catelyn turned his attention away from Arya and was about to go after him until Ned touched her shoulder. "I'll talk with him." He followed Robb back to his room. Ned approached the closed door and knocked. "Robb, open the door," he said, keeping his tone gentle. After a moment the door opened. Tears were dripping down Robb's cheeks. "Robb, what's wrong?" asked Ned, growing more concerned by the minutes. Robb tried to speak but couldn't get the words out of his throat. Ned stepped inside the room and closed the door behind him. He motioned Robb to the bed and the two sat down. "Tell me what's wrong, son," said Ned. "That murderer, Hubert, it's my fault," cried Robb. "What do you mean?" asked Ned. "I saw him earlier. He begged me for money, but I wanted to impress Rhaenys with flowers on her horse. He killed because I gave him nothing," said Robb. "That wasn't your fault. He killed because he chose to." "That had nothing to do with you," said Ned. He was at least a little grateful that Robb felt guilt about this. It meant his son actually cared about others, even those he didn't know. "But if I had given him some money then?" Robb stared to say. "He would have eventually spent it all and then needed more. He may not have killed then, but he would have in the future. When people are desperate, they will go to terrible lengths to get what they want, but just because they are sympathetic does not excuse them. Hubert and his family were hungry, but that did not excuse him breaking the law. And now you know that every decision you make has consequences for others. When you are king, every decision you make will affect the entire 7 kingdoms. Think carefully on every." Ned explained when a knock on the door interrupted him. "Your Grace. Urgent news from Casterly Rock," said someone behind the door. Ned got up and allowed the young man in, who handed him a letter. "Lord Arryn has requested a meeting of the small council immediately," added the page before leaving. Ned quickly skimmed through the letter's contents and realized his worst fears had come true. Lannisport was in flames. A sneak attack by the Iron Fleet had destroyed the Lannister fleet and lay ruin to the city. Without the Lannister fleet to keep the Ironborn in check, the Greyjoys now controlled the entire Sunset Sea and could raid and pillage all along the entire western coast of Westeros. "Father." "What is it?" asked Robb. "We're going to war," said Ned. Every member of the small council was on their feet, shouting at once as Ned entered the room. From what he could make out, they were arguing on what to present Ned the moment he stepped inside and what to advise him. Stannis wanted to launch a full-scale attack while Kevan wanted to concentrate on reinforcing the western shoreline. But as soon as he stepped inside the room, everyone went silent. "My lords, be seated," Ned spoke as he took his seat along with the rest of the council. "What news from Casterly Rock?" Varys was the first to speak. The attack on Lannisport was utterly devastating. The Iron Fleet managed to move in with lifeboats under the cover of night to dump wildfire around the Lannister fleet. After they were finished, a few torches were all that was needed to turn Lannisport harbor into an inferno. Admittedly, it was quite ingenious. Stannis scoffed, "I'm sure the men who died there appreciate you complimenting their murderers." Varys seemed to ignore the comment. "Sighting of Ironborn raiders have been spotted from the Shield Islands all the way north to Deepwood Motte. We must secure our coastlines and prepare barges to transport our levies to the Iron Isles. Balon Greyjoy will never stop this insanity until we give him no choice in the matter," said Kevan. "We cannot risk transporting anyone until the Iron Fleet is routed," said Master Gorman. "Have Lord Paxter Redwyne assemble his fleet and engage them. Lord Captain Victorian Greyjoy will have no choice but to concentrate his entire forces on them, which will give us the freedom to attack the Iron Islands," replied Hoster. "Paxter Redwyne is an incompetent commander. His fleet is large, but it is filled with men who haven't fought a single battle. During the last war, they anchored off the shore of Storm's End and did nothing. The Iron Fleet has been raiding and plundering ships and foreign cities for years. Their ships are crewed by battle-hardened veterans, and Victorian Greyjoy is one of the finest commanders alive," disagreed Stannis. "We need to deal with the Iron Fleet first before we can worry about invading the Iron Islands," said Jon. The rest of the council nodded in agreement. Ned finally spoke, "Then our course of action is clear. Lord Stannis, you will take command of the Royal Fleet and set sail for the Arbor. There you will link up with Lord Redwyne and his fleet and hunt down the Iron Fleet. We cannot do anything until they are dealt with." Stannis didn't seem pleased by the plan. Most likely because it meant working with people he fought against during the rebellion, but he didn't protest. "Yes, Your Grace. If you will excuse me, I must make preparations at once." Ned nodded, and the Baratheon rose from his table and exited the room. "Your Grace, Lords Tywin Lannister, Mace Tyrell, and Benjen Stark are assembling their hosts along the eastern shoreline, but the north has no navy and the westernlands lost theirs at Lannisport. Perhaps it is prudent for a rallying point to be chosen where their forces could gather to be ferried across the Sunset Sea," suggested Gorman. "Casterly Rock is the strongest fortress near the Iron Isles and can support thousands of troops outside its walls," added Kevan. Ned didn't like the idea of even stepping foot inside of Casterly Rock. Though Tywin Lannister was never punished for his actions during the war, Ned only did it to preserve the peace. Personally, he would have gladly severed Tywin's head for the terrible things that happened nearly 7 years ago. Ned managed to save the royal family, but he couldn't stop thousands of civilians who were slaughtered when Tywin's army entered King's Landing. But Casterly Rock was the best place to maintain a large force until Stannis managed to deal with the Iron Fleet. "Maester Gorman, send a raven to Casterly Rock and inform Lord Tywin to expect our arrival. Sir Kevan, you will go as well and make sure that shelter is prepared for our troops once they arrive. Send a raven also to Lord Mace Tyrell and split his forces. One half will protect the coastline of the Reach while the other will join with our invasion army. Lord Hoster, you will assemble what men you can spare from protecting your own shoreline and link up at Casterly Rock. Also inform Lord Doran to keep his levies in Dorne as well as the Storm Lords. We'll need them to protect their shorelines in case the Iron Fleet moves off the Sunset Sea, and also to watch for any pirates or mercenaries companies that might try to take advantage of the situation. Jon, you will remain here and rule in my stead," commanded Ned. Nothing else needed to be said. Gorman, Kevan, and Hoster all bowed and took their leave while Jon remained behind. "This is the moment of truth for your reign, Ned. If you cannot stop Balon and bring the Greyjoys under heel, the other great houses will follow their example and all of Westeros will drown in chaos. You need to make an example of Balon and make sure no one will ever rebel against you again," said Jon. The last time the old man looked this serious was the day he told Ned and Robert about Father and Brandon's death. Jon read from the letter from Aerys Targaryen demanding Ned and Robert's heads. Then he tossed the letter into a fireplace and swore justice for the Starks and the Baratheons. Catelyn wasn't pleased when Ned broke the news to her an hour later. "I won't send someone else to fight my battles for me," he explained in their room. "You are a king. You can do whatever you want," shouted Catelyn. Is that the kind of king you want me to be? Someone who sends others to do his duties for him. Someone who hides in his castle while others fight and die for him. Is that the kind of example you want me to set for our son? Snapped Ned. Their marriage had been forced upon them, but over the years Ned and Caitlin had grown to respect and even love one another. And if there was one thing that Ned had learned about her in all that time, it was that she never wanted to see her husband march off to war again. The two were silent for a moment, allowing them to calm down. "When do you leave?" sighed Caitlin. She must have known it was hopeless to convince Ned otherwise, and it broke his heart to see her like this. He remembered that same look on her face 7 years ago when Ned rode off to fight with Robert against the Mad King. "Tomorrow," answered Ned. He wasn't sure what else to say, or even if he should say anything else. Nothing he could say would make her feel better. "I don't care how many troops you have, Ned. All it takes is one mistake or one lucky arrow and our children will grow up without a father. I don't care how many servants and attendants they have. Rob, Sansa, and Arya need their father. Do whatever you have to come home alive," said Caitlin. "I will," promised Ned. Underscore 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 underscore. When morning arrived, Ned barely spoke a single word to his wife. He supposed that was for the best. Rob and Snow seemed to sense the tension during breakfast and were silent. Sansa was oblivious to it all and talked with her favorite doll. Ned couldn't help but smile at her innocence. Sometimes he wished she'd never have to grow up and learn how cruel and dangerous the world really was. But he made a vow to the Martells that should he ever have a daughter, she would marry Aegon. When she comes of age, Sansa would depart with her betrothed to Dragonstone. Hours later at midday, levies from the Crown lands had arrived outside the city and were awaiting their king. Ned Stark donned his black royal armor with a golden direwolf on the breastplate. Ice was sheathed in it. He needed to be presentable when he went out to meet with his bannermen. In the courtyard hundreds were assembled to see the king off, including Jon Arryn, Lysa, Elia, Aegon, Rhaenys, Daenerys, Caitlin holding Arya, Sansa, Robb, and Snow. All of them bent the knee when he stepped outside. Many of the small council was not in attendance, having left to make preparations for war. Stannis was at the docks preparing his fleet, and Hoster and Kevan had already left the city. Only Maester Gorman, Varys, and Jon were waiting to see the king off. "Rise," Ned commanded, and they returned to their feet. He had so many things to say and yet so little time for all of them. His bannermen were waiting and they need to get underway soon, so he had to make this all quick. He first approached Jon Arryn. 7 years ago I swore that was the last time I'd ever march off to war, Ned spoke. "At least you wanted that due to principle." "I just wanted peace because I'm getting too damn old for all of this," chuckled Arryn. The two laughed and then shook hands. "Take care of things while I'm gone," said Ned. "Don't worry. I'll make sure the kids don't destroy the Red Keep while you're away. You just concentrate on making those damned Ironborn regret the day they crossed you," replied Arryn. "Farewell, your grace. I wish you fortune and a swift victory," bowed Varys. "May the Seven watch over you," bowed Maester Gorman. Ned moved on to Elia. "Please help Caitlin in any way that you can." "I will, your grace," she replied. Ned said farewell to Rhaenys and Aegon before focusing his attention on Daenerys. With her parents, Ned was really the only parental figure in her life. Sure, Elia was a good aunt to her, but Ned was the one who raised her, helped her with her first steps, helping her learn West AOC language, aiding her in any way in that he could. This was the first time in Daenerys' life that she was truly going to be separated from Ned. Sobbingly, Daenerys jumped up and gave him a hug. "I'm going to miss you too," he added. Ned set her down and kissed her on the forehead. "Don't cause too much trouble while I'm away," he added. Ned next scooped up Sansa in his arms and kissed her on the head. "Daddy will be back soon. I promise," Ned told her before setting her down. Like Daenerys, Sansa was also crying. Ned wished he could say something to make her feel better, but no such words came to mind. He motioned for Robb to come forward next. "I wish we could have had more time to talk about yesterday, son, but it looks like that'll have to wait," Ned said. "Why is Mom so angry with you? Aren't you just doing your duty?" asked Rob. Ned sighed, "She's just worried, that's all." "But you have Uncle Benjen and Grandpa fighting with you as well as Lord Stannis and the Tyrells," said Rob. Clearly the boy had been eavesdropping again, though Ned never considered that a fault. All long as it wasn't something private. "That doesn't make it any easier, and I don't know how long I'll be gone. You take care of your mother and sisters for me, and I promise we'll have that talk when I return," promised Ned. The two hugged, and then Ned took Snow aside. "I need you to take care of Rob while I'm gone. Can you do that?" Snow nodded. "Stay safe, Uncle." The two embraced, and now Ned came face to face with his queen. The solemn look from last night was still on Catelyn's face. Nothing he said would change how she felt about this. She wanted her family together and safe, not separated and fighting in battle. Wordlessly, she handed Arya over to her father. Despite her age, the child was incredibly energetic and willful. Catelyn always joked that Arya is going to be a bigger handful than Robb and Sansa combined when she gets older. "Can you say Papa?" he asked. Arya smiled but said nothing. She could say Mama or Papa at times, but not always. Ned hoped to hear it one last time before leaving, but he didn't have time to wait. He kissed Arya on the cheek and handed her back to Catelyn. His wife leaned forward and quickly kissed Ned. "Come back to our children alive. Come back to me alive," she commanded. In that moment he could see through her stern mask to see how frightened she was of losing him. "I will," promised Ned. He turned and met up with Sir Barristan, who was holding a white stallion breed specifically for the king to ride. He mounted the animal and gave his family and friends one last look. Barristan handed Ned his helm and then mounted a horse right next to him. Sir Mandon Moore and Brynden Tully rode behind them along with dozens of other knights and riders as escort. "Move out," commanded the king. Underscore 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 underscore. No matter how many times Sir Davos Seaworth ever sailed on the Fury, he always felt out of place. Stannis's flagship was a triple-decked war galley of 300 oars with a deck covered with Scorpion launchers. Catapults were mounted fore and aft. Despite its size, it was still remarkably fast and agile. A large black stag was painted on its sails, letting everyone who saw it knew who commanded it. Davos always sailed small but maneuverable ships during his days as a smuggler, but he wasn't just standing on one of the largest ships Westeros but serving on it as well. Stannis Baratheon had ordered the royal fleet ready and prepared to leave immediately, and the crewmen were rushing all across the deck finishing preparations. Davos approached Stannis, who was standing on the foredeck inspecting the rest of the fleet. "My lord, half the captains report they are ready to sail and the others will be ready within the hour," he reported. Stannis kept his gaze on the other ships. "Once we are underway, I want you to begin drilling the men. Have them conduct whatever exercises you wish, but I want them to be ready for battle by the time we reach the Ubber." "Of course, my lord," replied Davos. He had expected such an order from the Lord of Storm's End. Stannis didn't just want to be prepared but to win. His duty was to smash the Iron Fleet, and Davos knew he would rather die than failing. "And once we join Lord Redwyne, you will take command of the vanguard," added Stannis. That did catch Davos off guard. Nobles originating from families with rich histories dating back hundreds, even thousands of years expected were normally the ones given such an honor, and yet Stannis was giving it to the son of a common crabber. "My lord, I'm honored, but surely such an honor is reserved for someone of more importance," protested Davos. "I define who is important in the royal fleet, and what is important is someone who knows how the Ironborn think. More than once you've sailed through the Sunset Sea and managed to evade their longships," said Stannis. "In the Sunset Sea, every smuggler needed to know how to avoid the Ironborn. The laws against piracy meant nothing to them on the open sea. Davos learned their tricks, how they hunted down their prey, and how to slip past them unmolested." Knowing he couldn't convince Stannis to change his mind, Davos nodded. "I pray I will serve you well, my lord, but the other lords, particularly Lord Redwyne, won't be pleased." "He'll learn," grunted Stannis. The sound of steel clashing together was quickly replaced by a scream. The wails of terror filled the courtyard as Garland Tyrell sighed in frustration. "Sam, I didn't hit you that hard," he tried to explain, but the poor boy continued to sob. Crying wasn't going to help Samwell get any better, and it certainly wasn't going to help him gain his father's approval. Samwell Tarley was the eldest son of Lord Randall Tarley of Hornhill, one of the finest soldiers in all of Westeros and a man who was disappointed in having a son he considered to be a craven. The Tarleys were a family of warriors that had led the armies of the Reach for centuries, with rich lands and a rare Valyrian sword named Heartspan that was held by the Lord of House Tarley. Randall won a great victory against Robert Baratheon during the War of the Usurper 7 years ago, though Garland's father Mace Tyrell took the credit and then led the siege of Storm's End. Lord Tarley didn't complain or argue about who deserved the glory, but instead carried out his duty to his liege lord. Such loyalty was not unnoticed, though, as years later Mace decided to have Garland fostered under Randall's tutelage. Lord Randall was strict but honourable. He made Garland carry out all the duties of a squire to perfection, but never abusive or unfair. Unfortunately, Garland couldn't say that was the same when it came to Randall's own son. "I can't do this," cried Samwell. Poor Sam was never good at fighting, and even worse at the sight of blood. One time his father wanted him to flay a stag, and Samwell fainted the moment a drop of blood got on his hands. Garland had tried to teach him some combat techniques, but even teaching him the basics seemed impossible. While Sam had a good heart, he didn't have a brave one. It frustrated his father so much that Lord Tarley had all but given up on the boy. "You can't any better by complaining. Now we'll try again," encouraged Garland. Unlike Sam, he was a master at swordplay even at his age. Garland was the second son of House Tyrell, which meant he wasn't going to inherit anything, which allowed him to concentrate fully on practicing with a sword, and he was getting better every day. He was starting to need to practice with two opponents now, as Garland felt that on the battlefield, you were never just fighting one man. Many Tarley knights were starting to boast that Garland would one day be better than Jaime Lannister. "Please Garland, I can't. Every time you swing your sword at me, my mind goes blank and I just panic," complained Sam. "You need to practice, Sam. Every man has to learn how to fight and protect his family. What if, God forbid, Hornhill is attacked and you are the only person who can defend your mother, sisters, and brother?" asked Garland as he lifted up his tawny sword back up. Sam glanced at his own blade and sighed, slowly lifting it back up as well. "Enough," shouted a voice before the two could clash. Garland turned to see Randall Tarley storming onto the courtyard with a scowl on his face. He glared daggers at his son, who cringed. "Get out of my sight," ordered Randall. Poor Sam quickly scampered off. Now Lord Tarley turned his eyes on Garland. "Pack your things tonight. We leave for Casterly Rock to meet your father in the morning," he continued. As Lord Tarley left, Garland felt a rush of excitement. He hadn't seen his father or any member of his family in years. Reading messages via ravens just wasn't the same as speaking to them personally. In fact, spending so long in Hornhill made Garland closer to the Tarley family than his own. Randall's wife Melissa was the opposite of her husband. She was kind and gentle, a loving parent who wasn't concerned about her children meeting expectations. She loved them all regardless. Aside from Samwell, they had 3 daughters and a younger son. Tala Tarley was the eldest daughter and a never-ending source of trouble for Garland. The girl was completely in love with him, even though he had never done anything to earn such affection. Personally, he would wish the girl would come to her senses and just leave him alone. Lauren and Oline at least didn't pester him with affection, thought they seemed to enjoy encouraging their sister's affection to their own amusement. The youngest child, Daikon, was Randall's favorite, and he spent most of his free time teaching the boy everything from basic language to martial skills. Garland thought he should spend more time trying to teach Samwell, but perhaps he had given up on that. After packing his personal belongings, Garland was on his way out to the stables when he heard sobbing in the study. He glanced inside to see Melissa comforting Sam. She turned her eyes and noticed Garland watching. "Come in, my boy. No need to hide," she smiled. Garland felt awkward as he stepped in. "It was my fault, my lady. I was trying to get Sam to spar with me, and Lord Tarley was displeased when he found us," he explained. He would always try to cover for Sam when he could. Garland remembered when Lord Paxter Redwine's twin sons Horus and Hobber visited Hornhill and spent all of their free time tormenting Sam. Years ago, Samwell was being fostered at the Arbor but was sent back after the twins teased and humiliated. Garland put an end to it all during a training session when he relentlessly bruised and battered the boys. After their beating, He gave them a warning to stay away from Samwell. They might be his cousins, but Garland had no love for either of them. "That's not why he's crying," replied Melissa. Sam turned to face Garland. "I don't want you to go. People die in war," he said. Melissa touched her son's shoulder. "Don't fret, Samwell. Even at his age, Garland is one of the best fighters I've ever seen in my life, and he'll be beside your father who has never lost a battle in his entire life," she comforted. "But there's always the risk," protested Sam. "Everything will be fine. Besides, if I know my father, I won't be setting foot on the Iron Isles," mumbled Garland. There was no way father was going to let him onto the battlefield, and with Lord Tarley being a loyal bannerman to him, Garland was probably going to sit out of the entire war. The words didn't seem to comfort Samwell though. No word seemed to the rest of the night. In the morning, Randall had amassed his knights were preparing to depart. He said goodbye to his wife, daughters, and Daikon, but didn't say a word to Sam. Garland said goodbye to the people who had become a family to him and even hugged Sam. Lord Tarley gave Garland a disapproving look, but Garland ignored him. "Don't die out there," said Sam. "I'll make you a deal. I'll come back alive if you tell your sister to stop harassing me," chuckled Garland. "Tala taking orders from me. I'm more likely to convince a stone dragon to come alive," sighed Samwell. "Pester her with some songs and poems. The really bad ones you've read about," suggested Garland before he headed towards his horse. Underscore 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 underscore. The howls of the Ironborn echoed on board the Iron Victory. A successful raid on Cricket Hall left Victorian Greyjoy's men with abundant spoils and salt wives. They could have taken the castle, but the armies of the Seven Kingdoms were marching to the Westerland coastline. Such a massive force could easily retake Cricket Hall, so Victorian ordered his men to take everything they could and leave. The battle was glorious. Victorian himself led the charge as the Ironborn used grappling hooks to scale the walls and cut through the knights of House Cricket Hall. Not a single one of them proved to be worthy of respect, and Lord Cricket Hall and his family fled instead of fighting. Such cowards didn't deserve the wealth and lands they held. Victorian had hoped to challenge some of the famed large members of the Cricket Hall family, but he saw none of them, and the knights and men-at-arms sworn to Cricket Hall received the brunt of his frustration. When the last of the household guard surrendered, Victorian's axe was dripping crimson red. The Ironborn took their spoils and prisoners back to their ships and sailed away, celebrating yet another victory. Victorian wished he could join in their bliss, but he knew the truth. No matter how many victories they won, the Ironborn were fighting a losing war. The drowned god had blessed them so far, but his enemy the Storm God was no doubt plotting against them. When it was time, Ned Stark would sail with the full fury of the Seven Kingdoms behind him, and the simple fact was that the Ironborn couldn't fight such a force. It was true that no army could sail to the Iron Isles at the moment. Victorian had seen to that at Lannisport by burning the Lannister fleet. Without them, the Sunset Sea belonged to the Kraken, but they won't be King Stark's only naval force. Stannis Baratheon was leading the royal fleet against them, and the Red Wine fleet was assembling at the Arbor. The Iron Fleet would fight to the bitter end, but would they be enough? Victorian stood on the deck of the Iron Victory, looking up at the clear night sky. The wind was calm and gentle tonight, which seemed to give off a foreboding warning. This was the calm before the storm, and when it did come, Victorian would be ready for it. He was ready to die on a moment's notice, but he feared for Pike and the fate of his house. Balon was the eldest, and so Victorian owed him fealty, but the man was arrogant and wanted too much, attacking the North, Riverlands, and Westerlands all at once. He was stretching his forces too far, and the Ironborn spent more time raiding and pillaging instead of actually trying to secure their independence. Euron was clever but craven and cruel. There were times when Victorian wanted to rip his heart out. Aeron was no leader, and neither were Balon's children. Roderick was too bloodthirsty and never thought about the consequences of his actions. Maren was a coward at heart, and Theon was just a boy. Captain Ragnar Pike called out as he approached the Lord Captain. A bastard born on the shores of Old Wyk, Ragnar was a dependable and loyal sailor throughout the 7 years he served alongside Victorian. Anywhere else he would be regarded as a bastard, but on the Iron Isles it was different. No one demanded respect, they earned it. Even Greyjoys had to earn the right to command. Respect gave power, and those even of low birth could rise within the ranks of the Iron Fleet. We just received news from Pike. Your nephew Roderick is moving to secure Seaguard, and Lord Harlaw is sailing to attack the Shield Isles. Victorian shook his head. We're scattering our forces. If we want to stand a chance against Eddard Stark, the Ironborn must be united. Not scattered about raiding and pillaging. The drowned god has blessed your brother's ascension. The burning of the Lannister fleet is proof of that, replied Pike. The Storm God will be on their side, and the Wolf King has the full backing of Westeros, said Victorian. Balon's theory of a fragmented Westeros has been proven wrong when the fighting began. He thought the Great Lords wouldn't help secure Ned Stark's kingdom and instead keep their armies to maintain their own borders. Instead, the attack unified the entire continent, and now they had assembled their massive hosts on the shores on the Sunset Sea. Only the Iron Fleet stood between them and the Iron Isles. One Ironborn is worth 100 knights of Westeros. No matter how many ships Stannis Baratheon and Paxter Redwyne bring with them, we will smash them, boasted Pike. How much longer until they reach us? Asked Victorian. According to our spies, Stannis has reached Dawn and should reach the Arbor in less than a week. Paxter is personally supervising the armament of his fleet and awaiting Stannis's arrival. Though the fog might slow them down. Reports have it that mist has been moving south along the shores of the Reach into the Summer Sea. It should make it difficult for any ship to navigate through, reported Pike. That's when Victorian knew the drowned god had answered his prayer. But also mask any ships sailing through it, he smiled. Underscore 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 underscore. If someone had asked Lord Benjen Stark 7 years ago if he would rather had been married with children or leading armies into war, he would have taken military command over family. After all, he was the youngest child in the Stark family. Brandon, Ned, and Lyanna were the important ones, not him. Benjen wanted to join the Night's Watch. Starks had manned the wall for thousands of years, and there he could ascend based on skill and valor, not order of birth. He would inherit nothing anyway, so it seemed like a simple decision. Then tragedy came in 3. Brandon died alongside father, Lyanna died in the Tower of Joy, and Ned got himself crowned king of the 7 kingdoms. The son who was supposed to get nothing got the Stark ancestral seat Winterfell along with all of the North. And now he was leading armies into war as the Lord of Winterfell with a family of his own back home. After Benjen returned from his brother's coronation 7 years ago, everything changed. What was supposed to be a simple ceremonial position had become permanent. He was supposed to be Lord of Winterfell until Ned returned, but he was never coming back. His duties required him elsewhere, which left Benjen with the burden. He surrounded himself with the most intelligent men he could find and set about maintaining the North. He married a beautiful woman named Irina Reed, sister to Lord Howland Reed. It was Ned who suggested the match. Howland was one of Ned's closest friends and saved his life more than once during the war against the Mad King. It wasn't exactly the most popular match among the Northern lords, who had always looked down upon House Reed and the rest of the Crannog men. Irina was almost wild and free-spirited as Lyanna, but Benjen loved her all the same. But she was in Winterfell with their 3 children, and Benjen was sitting among his lords in Cape Kraken deciding their next move. We should take local merchant ships and launch an assault on Harlaw. It's the closest of the Isles, and if we keep our ships close to the shore for cover, we launch them from the Cape of Eagles and reach the island in a matter of days, said Lord Jon, Greatjon, Umber. The Umbers were always known for their large size and fierce tempers, and the Greatjon was no different. Though a fierce warrior in battle and loyal unto death, the man was not a calculating tactician. To the Greatjon, brute force solved everything. The idea didn't sit well with Lord Roose Bolton. Taking merchants' ships by force will only incite the common folk, and without a naval fleet to protect them, they would be easy pickings for the Iron Fleet, he explained. Bolton was the exact opposite of the Greatjon. Roose was cold, calm, and calculating in everything that he does, and he would never attack unless he knew victory was assured. And what's your suggestion, Liege Lord? Sit on our asses until the Ironborn decide to attack us, spat Umber. Lord Richard Karstark nodded in agreement. We need to take the fight to them. Not wait until they attack our shores, burn our fields, and rape our women. He spoke with the same hot-bloodedness as the great Jon. The Karstarks were distant kin of the Starks. Their ancestor Karlon Stark was the younger brother of the Stark king who suppressed a rebellion of the Boltons and was given a holdfast as a reward for his service. The holdfast became known as Karhold and Karlon's family line became Karstark. Lord Mormont of Bear Island shook his head. And if we launch our ships without protection, they will be massacred. Then we won't have the men needed to protect our shores, fields, and women. The old bear was the oldest lord among those present. Despite his age, Gia was still imposing and given great respect. Those who questioned whether someone of his age should lead men into battle were silenced during Robert's rebellion when he fought under Ned's command. We have enough men to drive off any incursion, but they are scattered too far apart trying to protect the entire shoreline. If the Iron Fleet launch an incursion in a single area, they will easily establish a foothold. We must tighten our fortifications. They won't be able to cover as much ground, but they will be able to hold off an attack, said Lord Galbert Glover. Of all the lords in the north, House Glover had the biggest reason to fear an Ironborn invasion. Their seat Deepwood Motte was a castle close enough to the shore that it made a tempting target. We do have one advantage, began Benjen. Aside from the Iron Fleet, all of the Ironborn are scattered about raiding without any overall plan. They are so concerned with gaining their own personal spoils and glory that they are weakening themselves. They aren't united, and that will be their downfall. We will tighten our fortifications as Lord Glover suggests at least. Once Lord Stannis deals with the Iron Fleet, we'll take this way to them. Umber and Karstark weren't happy about it, but Bolton, Mormont, and Glover nodded in an agreement. If the Ironborn attack the north, they could quickly mobilize nearby fortifications to engage the invaders. But for now all Benjen Stark and the rest of the Northerners could do was wait. Underscore 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 underscore. Tyrion Lannister swore he could feel the tension through the air as the king and his entourage rode through the Lion's Mouth into the main courtyard. All of Casterly Rock had assembled to greet Ned Stark, and upon seeing him dropped to their knees. Tyrion knelt down beside Jaime and Cersei while father stood in front of the three, dressed completely different from the rest of his family. While his children were all dressed lavishly, Tywin's attire was casual. Father never cared for wearing bright clothing or fancy jewelry, as he always said that such things were nothing more than distractions. His commanding demeanor and presence is all he needs. Tyrion felt the seven hells had frozen over when he saw his father lowered his head. It is said that the great Tywin Lannister never bent the knee to anyone, not even Aerys Targaryen. Tyrion wasn't sure if that was true or not, but he had never seen the man ever bow to anyone his entire life. Though everyone else had lowered themselves to their knees, the Lord of Casterly Rock remained on his feet. If Stark was displeased by this, he showed no sign of it as he stopped his horse in front of father. "Your Grace," greeted Tywin. Tyrion never thought that anyone could look more commanding than his father, but now that he was staring at the king in all his battle armor, he was starting to question that old belief. The elaborate dark armor with a golden direwolf on the breastplate seemed almost minute compared to Eddard Stark's stern face. This was not a man who wanted to be visiting Casterly Rock or lay eyes on any of its tenants. But the ancestral home of the Lannisters was the strongest castle near the Iron Isles, and there was no better place to plan an invasion. King Stark dismounted from his house and motioned for everyone to rise. As Tyrion rose to his feet, he took note of the king's companions. Sir Barristan Selmy of the King's Guard, along with his fellow brothers in arms Sir Brynden Blackfish Tully and Sir Mandon Moore. The rest of the King's Guard were probably still back at King's Landing protecting the royal family. "Lord Tywin. I have brought 10,000 men with me, and Lords Hoster Tully and Mace Tyrell will be joining us soon with their own levies. They have their own provisions, but I expect shelter to be provided once they arrive and food ready in case of they run low," spoke the king. "Kevan is already seeing to it, Your Grace. I trust once you are settled in you will join my family for dinner," replied Tywin. Stark nodded in response. "We will wait until Lords Tully and Tyrell arrive before discussing any strategy." "As you wish, Your Grace," acknowledged Tywin. Tyrion was enjoying this too much, watching his father grovel to the man. The fact that he had never seen Tywin grovel to anyone made this all the more special and enjoyable. Father always called Ned Stark an unwashed northerner fool, but that was before the man became king. And now the mighty Tywin Lannister had been reduced to a lapdog of that unwashed northerner fool. Jaime leaned toward Tyrion and whispered, "This'll be interesting." He wasn't joking around. It was no secret Ned Stark and Tywin Lannister hated each other. If one was on fire, the only thing the other would do is pour wildfire on him. Having a naked woman suck my cock while another one pours wine into my mouth is interesting. Having the king and father eating at the same table is a once-in-a-lifetime extravagance, corrected Tyrion. Jaime chuckled in response. He was probably the only family member Tyrion that was kind to him. Of course, since Jaime was the future Lord of Casterly Rock and House Lannister, who needed to loved by anyone else. "Be quiet, you two," hissed Cersei. "Leave it to the sister to ruin whatever fun Tyrion had with Jaime." Ever since they were little, Tyrion and Cersei hated each other. It boggled the mind how different she was from her twin brother. Jaime was sarcastic and carefree while Cersei was grim and ruthless. In some ways she was like father, except for the fact that father was a genius and Cersei was an idiot. A fact that Tyrion loved to remind her of any chance he got. Stark had dismissed father and went back to his envoy to speak with his men. The crowd that had gathered to welcome the king was beginning to disperse. Tyrion was about to head back inside until he noticed Jaime heading towards Sir Barristan. Curious as to what was about to transpire, he followed his elder brother. Jaime came to a halt in front of Barristan and Blackfish with his signature smirk. Tyrion recognized it as the expression he used before the insults would fly out of his mouth. "So this is the kind of man they replaced me with. His Grace gets rid of a lion for a washed-up old trout," mocked Jaime. Barristan was about to say something, but the Blackfish beat him to it. "A trout is more trustworthy than a lion. Lions are nothing more than savage, stupid beasts anyways. Personally, I think the only rational way to deal with them is put them all down," replied Brynden. Jaime smiled. "You're welcome to try anytime, Blackfish. Wait a minute, that name doesn't suit you anymore now that you're a Kingsguard. How about Goldfish instead?" "Goldfish is still a better name than Kingslayer," Blackfish answered. Jaime wasn't fazed. And what a king he was. Aerys Targaryen II of his name. Psychotic king of the Andals, Rhaenyra, and the First Men. Warmonger and rapist of the Seven Kingdoms and protector of the Reem, he laughed. "Enough," snapped Barristan. Despite his age, the old man still had a dominating presence. Both the Blackfish and Jaime were silenced by the command. Few men could accomplish such a feat. "Save your insults and mockery for someone who cares, Jaime. For all your skills you were never worthy to be called our brother," spat Barristan. For the first time in the conversation, Jaime's smile faded. Apparently the old man knew more than just how to use a sword. The Kingsguard moved on, leaving a fuming Jaime. He turned and finally realized that Tyrion was right behind him. "You could have joined in. Make a few of those Barristan loose bowel jokes you used to say," said Jaime. "I thought you could have handled them yourself," shrugged Tyrion. "Well, you won't get a choice next time. Those two will be standing guard while we dine with Ned Stark," said Jaime. "Like I said before. A once-in-a-lifetime extravagance," smirked Tyrion. Underscore 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 underscore. Waves of salt splashed up against the bow, mixing with cool misty air. The unpleasantness only added to Lord Paxter Redwine's list of problems as he spat off the deck of his flagship, the Red Flower. When he got the Raven from King's Landing, he immediately began preparing the Arbor fleet for battle, but the thought of taking orders from Stannis Baratheon left a bad taste in his mouth. Paxter commanded the fleet that blockaded Storm's End during the war 7 years ago, and if there was one thing Lord Stannis was known for, it was never forgetting a slight of any kind against him. And now he was commanding the Royal Fleet and Redwyne's as well. From what Paxter heard, Stannis had barely sailed a day in his life. And yet he was given command over Paxter, who had been sailing most of his life. Everyone in the Arbor learned to ride the waves of the seas. After all, they were on an island. Paxter's mood wasn't improved by the fact that his fleet had been taking too long to mobilize. Stannis's fleet was already passing the Arm of Dawn, and yet Paxter's ships hadn't even left the docks. Not that anyone would want to sail in this fog. My lord. The captain of the White Rose says his sail is still giving him trouble. He wants. A page reported to him. I don't care what he wants, shouted Paxter, terrifying the messenger. You tell him to be ready to sail by the morning, or I'll have him thrown into the brig. Now go. The young man quickly nodded and took off. It didn't help that several of Paxter's fleet captains were cowards who had never fought a day in their lives. If Paxter had a golden dragon for every time one of his captains made an excuse, he'd be richer than the Lannisters. The last thing he wanted was to be embarrassed once Stannis arrived with the royal fleet and finds the Red Wine fleet not ready to sail. He glanced out into the misty bay that encompassed everything in sight. Hopefully it would clear up by the time they need to leave. If not, then Paxter would have taken that as a sign that the Seven were pissing on him. A flashing glow of light caught his eye in the distance. My lord. Signal fire, shouted the watcher from the crow's nest. The glow dimmed and brightened in a series of patterns. What does it say? Shouted back Paxter. They say Lord Stannis had engaged the Iron Fleet and needs to dock immediately for repairs and medical attention, replied the watcher. Stannis was already here. How was that possible? And he had already fought the Ironborn. When and where? Something about this whole thing just seemed off. Then Paxter began to make out a series of silhouettes emerging from the mist. Dozens of ships moving into the docks. 7 hells. Signal them to veer off and anchor offshore. We can't hold that many ships along with our own, shouted Paxter. Immediately men started a fire and sent out of the signal, but the ships got closer and closer. My lord, those shapes. Those are Longship, shouted the watcher. The blood drained from Paxter's face as the realization dawned on him. The royal fleet didn't use longships, only the Ironborn did. Battle positions. Prepare for attack. Victorian lowered his kraken-shaped helm onto his head, restricting his vision, but it was a small price to pay for protecting from a potential fatal hit to the skull. He was one of the few that wore armor into battle on the seas. The rest of his crew was afraid of falling off board and that armor would drag them down. So they wore light armor with no metal of any kind. Cowards, the lot of them. A true Ironborn should not be afraid to drown in the sea. They would just be taken down into the depths of the drowned gods' halls and reunite with their long-lost kin. You only needed to see who wore armor on the seas to distinguish the faithful from the non-faithful. The Iron Victory raced through bay among the carnage as the Iron Fleet and Red Wine Fleet clashed. The Ironborn had caught the Reachman off guard, but victory was anything but certain. Pages were already rushing back to Red Wine Castle to inform what happened, and hundreds of armored knights would come charging to aid the defense of their lord. No matter how strong the Iron Fleet was, their strength was in their ships. They needed to keep the fighting on the sea. Victorian commanded his ship to aim directly for the Red Flower, the personal flagship of Paxter Redwine. Hopefully the Lord of the Arbor would prove to be a more worthy opponent than the last few opponents Victorian slew. The Iron Victory sailed forward, but before Victorian's wish of battling the Arbor Lord could come true, a small ship was rowing into their path. At least the men serving Lord Redwine were brave. Victorian clenched his battle axe, eager to bloody it. His shield hand held onto the rails as the two ships collided. The impact nearly knocked the Lord Captain off his feet, but he managed to keep his balance. The Iron Victory easily smashed its ram right through the hull of the opposing ship, but now it was lodged in. The rowers below deck could back the ship out with enough effort, but not while the other ship was rowing against them. So that meant a boarding party had to subdue or kill everyone on the other ship. Time to bloody your swords. Victorian shouted to his crew. They cheered in response and assembled towards the front of the ship. The opposing crew was quickly assembling to defend themselves, but it wasn't enough. Victorian leaped onto their deck first, armed with a large battle axe and metallic shield with sharpened tips on the top and bottom. He cut through the first man within seconds, smashed his shield into the face of another, slammed the blunt end of his axe into the throat of a third. A knight came charging at him, sword raised high. Victorian dropped down, blocking the sword with his axe and slamming the bottom tip of his shield right through the man's right foot. The night battle cries turned instantly into shrieks of pain, which were quickly silenced when Victorian brought his shield up and stabbed him in the throat. All around him, the crew of the Iron Victory made short work of the other men. "Get this ship out of my way. I want Paxter red wine for myself," shouted Victorian. Underscore 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 underscore. Lord Randall kept his troops moving at a growling pace. Garland was getting sore from riding on horseback all day, but he was in no position to complain. Most of the men marching were on foot and not a single one of them complained or protested. One reason for that was because Randall ordered all his levies be combat trained at least once a month. It was expensive to train at least 4,000 men 12 times a year, but the results speak for themselves. It was most of these men who ambushed Robert Baratheon's forces during the War of the Usurper well ahead of the main Tyrell army. They fought an army much bigger than them and won. Of course, the other reason no one complained was because they feared and respected Lord Tarly. The man did not tolerate disobedience. But their pace had been well worth it seems. They were fast approaching the main Tyrell army and Garland could barely contain his excitement. The last time he saw his father was nearly 6 years ago when he saw Garland off to Horn Hill. Mace Tyrell was not the great warrior he tried to make himself out to be, but he was a man who loved his children. Father was almost in tears when Garland left Highgarden. "There they are," Randall pointed to a large encampment up ahead. A wooden barricade of sharpened stakes guarded by archers and pikemen surrounded the camp. Most people would accuse Mace of being overzealous by having it constructed. The Ironborn only attacked close to the shores and they are far away from the Sunset Sea. But Lord Tarly seemed satisfied by what he saw. In his mind, it was better to be prepared than risk anything by being lazy. The Tarly levies had already encountered a few outriders who rode back to inform Mace of their arrival, and it seemed word had spread around the camp as hundreds had gathered at the gates. Garland watched Randall ride through the gates first and the whole crowd seemed in awe. In his dark armor and large Valyrian sword sheathed behind his back, he was the embodiment of what a warrior of legend would look like. "Sir, I'll have the men set up camp in the empty lot over there. Garland, you're with me." "It's time to see your father," commanded Tarly before he rode past everyone straight to the command tent. It wasn't that hard to find as it was the largest one in camp. As soon as they dismounted, Mace stormed out of the tent. The moment his eyes saw his son, a smile formed on his face. Garland was at a loss for words at first. He'd been waiting for this moment for years and yet he couldn't think of what to say. "Garland," shouted Mace, rushing forward and embracing his son. Father had certainly changed over the last few years, growing a scruffy beard and a belly. "Gods, look at you." A man fully grown, Mace spoke when the two separated. He turned his attention to Lord Tarly. "I see I left him in good hands." "Your son has grown to become one of the finest warriors in the Reach, my lord," stated Tarly. "Ready your men for camp, Lord Tarly." "I wish to speak with my son alone," commanded Mace. Randall bowed his head and led his horse away. Father led Garland into the command tent, which had been furbished into a study with a desk and tables. For the better part of an hour, Garland recounted the past several years at Horn Hill. The good times and the bad. Mace filled him in on his family. Willers had been visiting holdfasts all over the Reach, getting to know his future bannerman. Marjorie had received so many suitors trying to win her hand that it drove Mace crazy. Loras had just already competed in his first jousting tournament and came in second. For someone of his age, that was impressive. "My boy, I have a surprise for you. I found you the perfect woman." Lady Leonette of House Fossoe, smiled Mace. Garland sighed. "Father, shouldn't you be focusing on marrying Willers? After all, he's your heir. All the more reason to not rush him to a marriage. That boy wants to marry a Dornish woman for the love of the Seven. And not just any Dornish, but the niece of the very man who Cripple Man granted Mace." Garland didn't need to be told her name. Had Willers' accident not happened, Father would have been overjoyed at the idea of his son marrying Arianne Martell. She was the heir to Dorne, and such a marriage would establish the Tyrells and Martells as one powerful force. For thousands of years, they had fought on opposite sides in one war after another, but if they joined houses, their power and influence would be second only to the Starks. "Arianne is a good match for him," said Garland. "Oh, enough about Willers. We're talking about your marriage. Leonette is a beautiful woman and I have no doubt she'll make you happy. Wait until you hear her play the harp. She made your mother cry, Mace replied. Garland was sure his father had the best of intentions, but he felt that such a marriage was detrimental towards Willers. It might send the message that Mace didn't believe that Willers could provide an heir and he was readying his second child to claim his lands and titles. Garland never wanted to be a lord. He wanted to a knight, off fighting the cruel and oppressive while defending the weak. It sounded like something out of a fairy tale, but Garland's dream never faded with time. 2 servants arrived holding plates containing fried duck and trout along with several other entries. Garland was starting to understand why his father had gained so